I stood alone beside my husband's casket, my trembling hands clutching a single white rose when my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter. "Sorry, Mom can't make it. Jessica's bachelorette party is tonight. Dad would understand." That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my husband's will right there in that empty funeral home and smiled coldly, because what my children didn't know was that their father had left one final gift and I was about to deliver it personally. The funeral home smelled of lilies and broken promises. White flowers everywhere, expensive arrangements I'd ordered myself because I wanted everything perfect for Richard's goodbye. The casket sat there gleaming under soft lights mahogany with brass handles. Exactly what he'd picked out 3 months ago when the doctor told us there was nothing more they could do. My husband had been so specific about everything. He knew. God help me, he knew this would happen. I sat in the front row surrounded by 200 empty chairs. The silence pressed against my ears like water, thick and suffocating. I could hear the funeral director Peter shifting his weight by the back wall, the soft rustle of the priest's robes, as he checked his watch for the 4th time in 10 minutes. They were both trying not to stare at me, this pathetic woman in her black dress waiting for people who were never going to come. My phone sat in my lap like a bomb. I kept checking it. It kept hoping. Maybe they were just running late. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe Marcus's business meeting had run over. Maybe Claire's limo had broken down. Maybe Thomas's flight had been delayed. But I knew better. I'd known since 7 o'clock that morning when I started making the calls. Marcus had answered on the 6th ring. I heard golf clubs in the background, that distinctive ping of metal hitting ballmen laughing about something. My son's voice had been distracted, annoyed even like I was interrupting something important. "Mom, hey, listen, I know today is Dad's funeral, but I've got this incredibly important client meeting. This deal could make or break the quarter. Dad always said business comes first, right? He'd want me to close this." I had gripped the phone so hard I thought it might crack. "Your father is dead, Marcus. This is his funeral, today, in 5 hours. "I know, Mom, I know, and I'm really broken up about it. But he's already gone, me being there won't bring him back. I'll come by this weekend. We'll have dinner toast to the old man." How about that? The old man. My 46-year-old son called his father the old man. Not Dad. Not my father. The old man, like Richard, was some distant relative he barely knew. "Marcus, please, I'm begging you. Just 3 hours. Just come say goodbye." "Mom, don't be dramatic. I'll make it up to you, okay? Gotta go, clients walking up." "Love you?" The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there on the edge of our bed, the bed where Richard had slept for 43 years, where he'd held me through miscarriages and job losses and the deaths of both our parents, where he'd made love to me just 6 months ago before the cancer got too bad and I felt something crack inside my chest. But I swallowed it down and called Claire. She picked up immediately, but I could barely hear her over the music thumping in the background. Dance music, the kind they play at clubs, at parties, at bachelorette celebrations, where young women get drunk and forget they have families waiting for them. "Mommy, oh my God, I'm so glad you called," she was shouting over the noise. "I feel terrible about this, I really do, but Jessica's bachelorette party has been planned for 6 months. I'm the maid of honor. I can't just not show up. Everyone's counting on me." "I'm counting on you, Claire. Your father is counting on you." The music got quieter suddenly, like she'd stepped outside or into a bathroom. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Gone sharp and cold. "Dad's not counting on anything anymore, Mom. Look, I don't want to sound harsh, but he's gone. He won't know if I'm there or not. Jessica will definitely know if I'm not at her party. This is her big day. This is your father's big day, too. His last day. His goodbye." "God, Mom, don't be so dramatic. You're always so dramatic about everything. I'll come by next week. We'll go through his stuff, figure out the estate, all that. Okay, I really have to go. The limo's here and everyone's waiting. Love you." Click, the estate. That's what she wanted to talk about. Not memories of the man who walked her down the aisle 3 years ago, who paid for her entire wedding when her husband's family couldn't contribute a dime, who bought them their house as a wedding present. The estate. I didn't even try to call Thomas. I already knew. I sent him a text instead. "Your father's funeral is today at 2 p.m. Please come." The response came back in 30 seconds. "In Cabo with the boys. Flight back isn't until Tuesday. Really sorry, Mom. We'll make it up to you. Love you." Then 3 heart emojis like little red hearts could substitute for him being there for him, caring enough to change his flight for him, giving a single damn that his father was dead. Cabo, spring break in Mexico, with the boys. I sat there for a long time, just staring at those 3 heart emojis. Thomas was 40 years old. 40. And he was on spring break with the boys like he was 22 and immortal, and his parents would live forever. I had cried then. Not the gentle tears of a grieving widow, but the ugly sobbing of a woman who just realized she'd failed at the most important job of her life. Richard and I had built an empire. We'd started with nothing, absolutely nothing, and built a $47 million fortune. We'd given our children everything, the best schools, the best clothes, cars, vacations, opportunities. We'd never said no. We'd never made them struggle or want or work for anything. And we'd created monsters. But I dried my tears and made one more call. To Jonathan Blackwood, Richard's lawyer and best friend, for 30 years, the man who'd spent the last 3 months helping my husband put his affairs in order. Jonathan, I need you at the funeral. I need you to bring the documents. All of them. Every single page. It's time. There was a long pause on the other end. Margaret, are you sure? Maybe you should wait, take some time to grieve, to think about this. Richard wrote that will when he was angry and scared and tired and dying. You don't have to follow through with it. He wasn't angry, he was clear. He told me exactly what would happen today, and I didn't believe him. I defended them. I made excuses for them. Not anymore. All right, I'll be there in an hour. Defiance. And now here I sat 90 minutes later in an empty funeral home. The service had been scheduled for 2 o'clock. It was now 2:45. The priest had suggested we wait, but I told him no. No more waiting. No more hoping. No more pretending my children were something they weren't. Peter approached me quietly, his footsteps soft on the carpet. Mrs. Harrison, I'm so sorry. Perhaps some people are just running very late. Maybe we could postpone until tomorrow. I looked up at him and saw pity in his eyes. This kind man who'd buried my mother 5 years ago, who'd seen hundreds of funerals, who probably thought he'd seen every kind of family drama there was. He had no idea. No one is coming, Peter. Let's begin. The service was the saddest thing I'd ever experienced. The priest read from a generic script passages about death and resurrection that could have applied to anyone, to a stranger, to someone nobody loved. He didn't know Richard. How could he? How could he? He'd met my husband once 3 months ago when Richard had arranged everything himself because he was a planner, because he wanted to spare me the burden. 20 minutes. That's how long it took to say goodbye to a man who'd lived 71 years, who'd built a company from nothing, who'd employed 300 people, who'd donated millions to charity, who'd coached Little League and served on the hospital board and never missed a single one of his children's school events until they got too cool to want him there. 20 minutes and an audience of 3. Me, the priest, the funeral director. When it ended, when the final prayer had been said and the casket closed for the last time, Jonathan appeared at my elbow. He'd been sitting in the back row trying to be unobtrusive, but I'd felt him there the whole time, a witness to this humiliation. Margaret. He sat down beside me, setting his worn leather briefcase on the seat next to him. The briefcase Richard had given him 20 years ago when Jonathan made partner. Are you ready to do this? Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me Richard was right. Jonathan looked at the empty chairs, at the flowers no one was there to see, at the guest book by the door that didn't have a single signature. Your husband told me 3 months ago when we were drawing up the final version of the will that none of them would come. I told him he was being too harsh, too pessimistic. He said, Jonathan, I know my children. I know what I created, and Margaret is going to need you to remind her of this moment when she wants to forgive them. He made me promise to bring you back here to this room if you ever wavered. I'm not wavering. I'm furious. Good, because what we're about to do can't be undone. Once we execute this will, once we inform them, there's no taking it back. You'll become the villain in their story. You know that, right? I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. I'm already the villain. I'm the mother who demanded they show up to their father's funeral. I'm the dramatic one for thinking their father's death should matter more than golf and bachelorette parties and boys' trips to Cabo. Jonathan opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. Inside were documents, so many documents, the accumulated wealth of a lifetime reduced to legal language and dollar signs. Your husband's estate is valued at approximately $47 million. That includes the primary residence, 4 investment properties, the business stock portfolio bonds, and liquid assets. $47 million. Richard had started with a pickup truck and a willingness to work 18-hour days. He'd built Harrison Development Group from nothing, one construction project at a time, turning every property he touched into gold. And he'd done it all for his family, for our future, for our children's futures. The primary residence on Willow Creek Lane, valued at $4.2 million, goes to you. It's in both your names anyway, so that's straightforward. I nodded. Our home. The 8-bedroom mansion we'd built 15 years ago that Marcus had thrown a tantrum about because he'd wanted us to buy the lot next door for him. We'd said no one of the few times we'd ever denied him anything, and he'd pouted for 6 months. The vacation properties, the ski lodge in Aspen, the beach house in Malibu, the cabin in Montana, all go to you with a specific clause. Jonathan looked up at me. Richard added this 2 months ago. He wanted me to read it to you verbatim. Go ahead. These properties are for my wife's enjoyment and use only. Should any of our children request to use them, Margaret is instructed to inform them that unfortunately the properties are already booked. All properties are to be rented out at market rate when Margaret is not using them, with all proceeds going to Margaret's personal discretionary fund. Under no circumstances are our children to be given access to these properties without a rental agreement at full market rate, no family discount. I felt a savage little thrill at that. The beach house especially, it was Marcus's favorite place in the world. He'd gotten engaged there. His children had learned to surf there. He took clients there. He'd tried to convince us to deed it to him for his 50th birthday, still 3 years away, because he wanted to expand the deck and add a home theater, and we wouldn't let him make those kinds of changes to our property. Well, it would never be his property now. The investment portfolio, Jonathan continued. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, currently valued at approximately $12 million. All to you with the same clause about it being your personal discretionary fund. Any dividends, any capital gains yours to do with as you please. $12 million in stocks alone. Richard had been so smart about investing, so careful and strategic. Every bonus, every profit share, every windfall had gone into carefully chosen investments. While our friends had bought boats and second homes and luxury cars, Richard had built wealth that would last generations, if our children had been worthy of it. Now we get to the big one, Jonathan said quietly. Harrison Development Group. This was it. This was the nuclear option. The business was worth at least $30 million, probably more, if you counted ongoing contracts and future development rights. Marcus had worked there since college, had assumed he'd take over as CEO, had even started introducing himself as the future owner at business functions. Claire's husband worked there too in project management, pulling a salary he wasn't qualified for because Richard had been generous. Thomas was on the board of directors despite never attending meetings and knowing nothing about real estate development. They'd all counted on inheriting the company, their meal ticket, their legacy. Harrison Development Group, all assets, contracts, holdings, intellectual property, and ongoing projects is to be sold. Jonathan's voice was steady, but I could hear the weight of it. Richard retained a business broker 6 weeks ago. The sale is already in motion. There are 3 interested buyers. The business will likely sell within 90 days. And the money from the sale goes into the estate, 75% to you, the remaining 25% to be distributed to various charities as listed in Appendix C. I have the list here. The Children's Hospital where Richard volunteered, the Veterans Organization, the Literacy Foundation your mother loved, the Cancer Research Center. I felt tears prick my eyes again. Even in death, even in his disappointment and anger, Richard was thinking about giving back, about helping others, about leaving the world better than he found it. Our children get nothing from the business. Nothing. They're terminated from employment effective immediately upon your husband's death. Marcus will receive 6 months severance as CEO. Claire's husband gets 3 months as per company policy. Thomas gets nothing because board positions aren't salaried. They're going to lose their minds. Yes, they are. Jonathan flipped to another section, and I could see his hands were shaking slightly. This part was hard for him, too. He'd known my children since they were babies. He'd been at their baptisms, their graduations, their weddings. The personal bequests. Do you want me to read them? Yes, I need to hear it. I need to remember why we're doing this. He cleared his throat. To my son Marcus Harrison, I leave my 1967 Mustang, which he admired as a boy, and the sum of $1. I do this not out of spite, but out of hope that he will understand that some things in life cannot be bought or inherited. They must be earned through presence, through love, through showing up when it matters. I hope he learns this lesson before it is too late for his own children to forgive him. $1, one single dollar to his firstborn son. Marcus would lose his mind. He'd probably try to contest the will, claim his father was mentally incompetent, drag me through court. But Richard had been so careful. He'd had cognitive testing done, had video recorded himself explaining his choices, had 3 doctors sign affidavits that he was of sound mind when he made these decisions. To my daughter, Claire Harrison Thompson, I leave my mother's pearl necklace, which she always admired, and the sum of $1. I hope she will remember that true treasure is not found in parties or social obligations, but in the quiet moments with those who love us unconditionally. I pray she discovers this before she loses what truly matters. The pearl necklace. It was worth maybe $2,000, nothing compared to the millions Claire had expected. But it would hurt worse than getting nothing, because it would remind her every time she looked at it that she'd failed her father, that she'd chosen a bachelorette party over his funeral. To my son Thomas Harrison, I leave my Purple Heart from my service in Vietnam, which he has never asked about, in the sum of $1. I hope that one day he will understand that sacrifice means something, that duty means something, that family means more. It's more than boys' trips to Cabo. I hope he becomes a man worthy of wearing this medal, even if only in spirit. The Purple Heart. Richard had been shot twice, saving 3 men from his unit. He'd spent 6 months in a military hospital, had shrapnel in his leg for the rest of his life that ached when it rained. He'd tried to tell Thomas about it once, about the war, about what he'd seen and done. Thomas had fallen asleep on the couch halfway through, bored by his father's history. "And the remainder of the estate?" I asked, though I already knew. "Approximately $9 million in liquid assets after all other bequests and the business sale. All to you with one final instruction." Jonathan pulled out another piece of paper, this one in Richard's shaky handwriting. He wrote this himself and had it notarized separately. He wanted to make absolutely sure there was no ambiguity. "Read it. To my beloved wife, Margaret, I leave everything else because you were the only one who stayed. You were the only one who held my hand through the pain. You were the only one who sat with me in the dark hours before dawn when I was afraid of dying alone. You were the only one who loved me, not for what I could give you, but for who I was. Use this money to live the life we always dreamed of. Travel the world, see the pyramids, walk the Great Wall, dance in Paris. And if our children come to you asking for their inheritance, asking for what they think they deserve, you tell them this: I gave them everything I had for 46, 43, and 40 years respectively. I gave them my time, my love, my money, my guidance, my protection, my wisdom. I gave them every advantage, every opportunity, every comfort. And when I needed them most, when I was dying, when I was leaving this world, and wanted only to see their faces one last time, they couldn't give me 3 hours. They couldn't give me 1 afternoon. They couldn't show up. So now they get exactly what they gave me in my final days. Nothing that matters. Love you forever. Richard." The room blurred as tears filled my eyes. This was my husband. This was the man who'd loved me for 43 years, who'd built a life with me, who'd known me better than I knew myself. Even dying, even betrayed by his own children, he'd been thinking about me, protecting me, making sure I'd be taken care of. "There's one more thing." Jonathan reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a white envelope. My name was written on it in Richard's handwriting, shakier than usual, but unmistakably his. "He asked me to give you this after I read the will. He said you'd need it tonight." I took the envelope with trembling fingers. It was thick, multiple pages inside. Richard's final words to me. His goodbye. "I'll step outside," Jonathan said quietly. "Take all the time you need." He left, and I was alone again with Richard's casket and a letter I was terrified to open. Because once I read it, that was it. No more words from my husband. No more guidance. No more of his steady presence telling me I was doing the right thing. I opened the envelope. "My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then I was right. They didn't come, did they? Our children chose something else, anything else, over saying goodbye to their father. And I know you, my darling. I know you're sitting there crying, wondering where we went wrong, wondering how we failed as parents. We didn't fail, Margaret. We succeeded too well. We gave them everything. That was our mistake. We gave them so much that they never learned to value anything. We made their lives so easy that they never learned struggle, never learned sacrifice, never learned that some things matter more than convenience or fun or business deals. I don't blame them entirely. How can I? I'm the one who paid for Marcus's car when he totaled his first one driving drunk at 22. I could have let him face consequences, let him take the bus, let him learn, but I didn't want my son to suffer, so I bought him a better car and paid his lawyer and made the DUI disappear. I taught him that money fixes everything, that Dad will always bail him out. I'm the one who bought Claire her house when she complained about apartment living being beneath her. I could have told her to save up, to work harder, to earn it herself. But I didn't want my princess to be uncomfortable, so I handed her a $3 million house, and she never even said thank you. She just asked why we didn't get her the one with the bigger yard. I'm the one who bailed Thomas out of credit card debt 5 times, paid his mortgage when he was unemployed for 2 years because he didn't want to take a job that wasn't prestigious enough, gave him a board position he didn't earn, and a salary for doing nothing. I could have let him fail, let him learn, let him grow up, but I couldn't stand to see him struggle. I created this Margaret. I made them this way. And now I'm dying, and they can't be bothered to say goodbye because I never taught them that people matter more than plans. But you. My God, you were the foundation of everything. While I was building my empire, you were building our family. While I was chasing money, you were making sure our children knew they were loved. You did everything right, and I did everything wrong, and somehow we ended up here anyway. I'm not doing this to punish them, though I know that's how they'll see it. I'm doing this because maybe, just maybe, losing everything will teach them what having everything never could. Maybe hitting rock bottom will show them what really matters. Maybe losing their inheritance will make them better people than being rich ever did. Or maybe it won't. Maybe they'll hate us both and we'll lose them forever. But Margaret, we already lost them. We lost them a long time ago. At least this way, there's a chance they'll find themselves. Use the money, love. Live the life I never gave you because I was always working, always building, always chasing the next deal. Go to Paris. Go to Rome. Go to all those places we talked about visiting someday. Don't wait for someday. Someday is now. And if our children come around, if they genuinely change, if they show you through actions, not words that they understand, what they lost today, then maybe you can help them. But make them earn it. Make them prove they've learned. Make them show you they're worthy of a second chance. I love you more than I ever found the words to say. Thank you for 43 years of being my partner, my lover, my best friend, my everything. Don't mourn too long. I'll wait for you, but live first. Live for both of us. Forever yours, Richard P.S. Don't forget to water my tomato plants. I started them from seed this year, and I'd hate to see them die. Maybe you'll get to taste them in July. I won't, but you can tell me about it when you see me again. I read the letter 3 times, memorizing every word, every loop of his handwriting, every place where the pen had pressed harder when his hands shook from the pain medication. This was Richard. My Richard. Still thinking about tomato plants even as he planned the nuclear destruction of our children's expectations. He was right, about everything. I knew he was right, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope, then pressed it against my chest like I could absorb his presence through the paper. Then I stood up, smoothed my black dress, and walked to where his casket sat surrounded by flowers that cost thousands of dollars that no one was there to see. I'll do it, I whispered, putting my hand on the smooth wood. I'll do exactly what you asked. And God help me, I hope you're right about this. I hope this is the wake-up call they need. Because if it's not, if this just makes them hate me and I lose them forever, I don't know if I can survive it. But I would survive it. I was a 70-year-old woman who'd raised 3 children, nursed her husband through terminal cancer, and built a life from nothing alongside a man who'd loved her. I was stronger than I looked. Stronger than my children had ever given me credit for. I called Jonathan back in. I want to proceed with everything exactly as Richard wrote it. No changes, no amendments, not one word. When do you want to inform them? Tonight. I want all 3 of them in our house tonight, in Richard's study. I want to tell them together so they can't claim they heard it wrong or that I'm being vindictive to just one of them. Margaret, I really think you should wait a few days, let yourself grieve, let the shock wear off. No, tonight, while I'm still angry, while I still have the courage, while I can still see this empty room in my mind and remember that they chose parties over their father's funeral. Jonathan nodded slowly. He understood. I'll call them. I'll say it's about the estate and it's time sensitive. That will get them there. Yes, I said coldly. Amazing how the promise of money can accomplish what their father's death could not. They'll move mountains to make a meeting about the estate, but his funeral, that was optional. I gathered my things, my purse, the program from a service no one attended, the white rose I'd planned to place on the casket but hadn't because what was the point? Peter approached as we headed toward the door. Mrs. Harrison about the burial tomorrow at 10. Yes. The plots you purchased. There are 6 of them. For you and your husband and your children and their spouses. Should I contact them about the burial service? I looked at this kind man who was trying so hard to help to make this easier to follow protocol. Don't bother. If they wouldn't come to his funeral, they won't come to watch them put him in the ground. It'll just be me tomorrow, Peter. Me and the cemetery workers and a priest who doesn't know my husband's name. His face crumpled with sympathy, and I had to look away before I started crying again. Outside, the late afternoon sun was shining. It was beautiful warm, but not hot, with a breeze that smelled like jasmine from somewhere nearby. The kind of perfect day that made you grateful to be alive. The kind of day Richard had loved when he'd talk about retiring early, about traveling, about finally taking that trip to Tuscany we'd been planning since our 30th anniversary. I'd go to Tuscany now. I'd go everywhere. I'd live the life Richard wanted for me, and I'd do it knowing I'd honored his final wishes, even though it destroyed me. But first I had to face my children. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the sound of traffic and my own thoughts. Our house looked the same as it always did, huge and beautiful and empty. Richard and I had lived alone here for 15 years, rattling around in 8 bedrooms because we'd built it thinking our children would visit often, that grandchildren would run through the halls, that Sunday dinners would be loud and chaotic and full of love. Instead, they came maybe 3 times a year. Always with their hands out, always wanting something. Money for a business venture. Help with a mortgage. An investment in a friend's startup. They treated our home like a bank branch, where they could withdraw from the First National Bank of Mom and Dad whenever they needed a loan. I walked through the house touching Richard's things. His reading glasses on the side table. His coffee mug in the sink that I hadn't been able to wash because it still smelled like him. His jacket hanging by the door. The indent in his favorite chair where he'd sat every evening reading the newspaper, old-fashioned even in the digital age. In his study, I sat behind his massive oak desk and looked at the photos on the wall. Our wedding day young and hopeful and so in love. The kids as babies chubby and perfect. Family vacations where everyone was smiling. Birthday parties. Graduations. Weddings. When had it changed? When had those sweet children who'd climbed into our bed on Saturday mornings turned into these strangers who couldn't spare 3 hours for their father's funeral? I didn't have time to figure it out. Jonathan was making the calls. My children were coming, and I had to prepare myself for what came next. At 7 o'clock, I heard the front door open. Marcus always early when money was involved. His footsteps were heavy on the marble floor, confident the walk of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. "Mom," he called out, "where are you?" "Your father's study." He appeared in the doorway, still wearing his golf clothes. He hadn't even bothered to change. Polo shirt, khaki shorts, expensive sneakers that cost more than some people's monthly rent. His face was tanned and healthy, not a trace of grief or guilt. "Hey." He kissed my cheek perfunctorily and dropped into one of the leather chairs across from the desk. "So what's this about?" Jonathan made it sound urgent. Something about the estate. "We'll wait for your sister and brother." "Can't you just tell me I've got dinner plans at 8:30, important clients?" Of course he did. I didn't answer, just looked at him until he shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Claire arrived 10 minutes later, rushing in with her phone attached to her ear. She was wearing a tight dress, full makeup, her hair perfect. She'd come straight from the bachelorette party, and I could smell alcohol on her breath. "Mom?" She air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "This better be fast. We're going clubbing in an hour, and I need to get home and change." She saw Marcus, and her face lit up. "Oh, good you're here too. Maybe we can do this quick." She threw herself into the other leather chair, already texting someone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Put the phone away, Claire." "Just 1 second. Jessica's freaking out about something." "Now." Something in my voice made her look up. She saw my face and slowly, reluctantly put her phone face down on her lap. "Fine. Where's Tommy?" As if summoned. Thomas appeared looking rumpled and hungover. He was still tan from Cabo, his hair, sun-bleached, wearing board shorts and a t-shirt with a beer logo on it. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane." He hugged me a real hug, and I felt a tiny spark of hope before I remembered he was the one who'd sent me heart emojis instead of coming to his father's funeral. They were all here, my 3 children, sitting in their father's study in the house he'd bought, looking at their phones and checking their watches, impatient to get this over with so they could return to their lives. There was a knock at the door, and Jonathan came in, briefcase in hand. His face was carefully neutral, professional, giving nothing away. "Jonathan," Marcus said, standing to shake his hand. "Good to see you. Glad you called this meeting. We should get the estate sorted out as quickly as possible. No point dragging things out." Jonathan didn't respond, just took a seat in the corner with his briefcase on his lap. Claire looked between us, finally sensing something was wrong. "What's going on? Why does Jonathan look like someone died?" She laughed at her own joke. "I mean, other than Dad." "That's exactly right, Claire," I said quietly. "Your father died 2 days ago, and today we held his funeral." "Yeah, we know, Mom," Thomas said, trying to be gentle. "We're really sorry we couldn't make it. But we're here now. Let's talk about what Dad left us and how we want to handle things going forward." "What your father left you," I repeated slowly. "That's why you're here. That's why you all managed to find time in your busy schedules. Not to grieve, not to support me, not to honor your father's memory, but to see what you inherited." Marcus frowned. "Mom, don't be like that. Of course we're sad about Dad, but life goes on. He'd want us to be practical about this." "Would he? Would your father want you to be practical? Let me tell you what your father wanted." I opened the folder Jonathan had given me and pulled out the will. Jonathan, please read them, the relevant sections. Mrs. Harrison, are you certain you want to do this now, perhaps in a few days when emotions aren't so raw? Now, read it now. Jonathan opened his briefcase and pulled out his copy of the documents. The room had gone very quiet. Even Claire had stopped checking her phone. This is the last will and testament of Richard James Harrison executed on August 15th of this year, witnessed and notarized with full cognitive testing performed to establish testamentary capacity. Why would Dad need cognitive testing? Marcus interrupted. He wasn't senile. Let him finish, I said coldly. Jonathan continued. The estate is valued at approximately $47 million. This includes the primary residence, multiple investment properties, Harrison Development Group stocks, bonds, and liquid assets. I watched my children's faces. They were doing math dividing by 3, already spending their inheritance in their minds. The primary residence and all investment properties are left solely to Margaret Harrison. That makes sense, Marcus said. Mom needs somewhere to live, but obviously will inherit those when she passes. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Keep listening. Harrison Development Group is to be sold immediately upon Richard Harrison's death. 75% of the proceeds go to Margaret Harrison. 25% goes to various charities as detailed in the appendix. The room exploded. What? Marcus was on his feet. Sold Dad selling the company. That's my company. I've worked there for 20 years. The investment portfolio, currently valued at $12 million, goes entirely to Margaret Harrison. This is insane, Claire said, her voice rising. Why is everything going to Mom? What about us? We're his children. There are personal bequests, Jonathan said calmly. To Marcus Harrison, the 1967 Mustang, and $1. Silence. Marcus's face had gone purple. $1? $1 This is a joke. This has to be a joke. To Claire Harrison Thompson, Richard Harrison's mother's pearl necklace, and $1. Claire's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The necklace, just the necklace. But what about the beach house? What about the stocks Dad promised me? To Thomas Harrison, Richard Harrison's Purple Heart, and $1. Thomas looked genuinely confused. What's a Purple Heart? And there it was. My youngest son didn't even know what his father's military medal was. Didn't know Richard had served in Vietnam. Didn't know he'd been wounded. Didn't know anything about the man who'd raised him. This is bullshit, Marcus snarled. Dad was clearly not in his right mind. We'll contest this. No court will uphold a will that leaves everything to one person and cuts out the children completely. Your father anticipated that, Jonathan said smoothly. That's why he had extensive cognitive testing done. 3 separate doctors evaluated him. He recorded a video explaining his choices. He was of completely sound mind when he made these decisions. Then Mom manipulated him, Claire shouted, jumping to her feet. She poisoned him against us. She probably wrote this whole thing herself. I assure you I did not, I said quietly. Your father wrote this will himself. He knew exactly what he was doing and why. Why? Thomas asked, and he actually looked hurt. Why would Dad do this to us? Jonathan read them the letter. Margaret, I don't think that's wise. Read it. Jonathan sighed and pulled out the page with Richard's handwriting. This is a personal statement Richard Harrison wrote to be read to his children upon the reading of the will. I quote, I gave you everything I had for 46, 43, and 40 years respectively. I gave you my time, my love, my money, my guidance, my protection, my wisdom. I gave you every advantage, every opportunity, every comfort. And when I needed you most, when I was dying, when I was leaving this world, and wanted only to see your faces one last time, you couldn't give me 3 hours. You couldn't give me 1 afternoon. You couldn't show up to my funeral. Marcus, you chose golf with clients. Claire, you chose a bachelorette party. Thomas, you chose Cabo with your friends. So now you get exactly what you gave me in my final days. Nothing that matters. The silence that followed was deafening. That's not fair, Claire whispered. That's not fair. I explained to Mom that Jessica's party was important. More important than your father? I asked softly. He was already dead. He wouldn't have known if I was there or not. I was there. I knew. I stood in that funeral home completely alone because all 3 of you had somewhere better to be. Marcus was pacing now, his hands in his fists. This is revenge. You're punishing us for missing 1 day. 1 day, Mom. The most important day. The last day. The only day that mattered. So what we get nothing 20-plus years working at the company, and I get nothing Dad promised me that company. He promised I'd take over as CEO. Your father promised you nothing. You assumed. Just like you assumed you could skip his funeral and there would be no consequences. Thomas was crying, now actual tears running down his face. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry. I made a mistake. I should have come home. Please don't do this. My heart cracked a little. Tommy was the youngest, always the softest of the three, but I couldn't let sympathy sway me now. Your father didn't do this to be cruel. He did it hoping you'd learn something. That some things can't be bought or inherited. That presence matters. That showing up matters. That people are more important than plans. Great life lesson, Dad, Marcus said bitterly. Really teaching us a lot by screwing us over. You're not screwed over. You all have jobs, homes, and opportunities. You just don't have your father's money. You'll have to make your own way now, like Richard and I did. This is bullshit. Marcus grabbed his keys from his pocket. I'm calling my lawyer. We'll contest this. You won't get away with this. Do what you need to do, I said calmly. But the will is ironclad. Your father made sure of it. You can spend your money fighting it if you want, but you'll lose. Claire was crying now, 2 ugly mascara tears. How could you do this to us? How could you let Dad do this? You're our mother, and you're my children, and you couldn't be bothered to come say goodbye to your father. What does that make you? It makes us human, she screamed. It makes us people with lives and obligations and things going on. We're not perfect. We made a mistake. Are you really going to destroy our lives over one mistake? This wasn't one mistake, Claire. This was the culmination of years of taking your father for granted. Years of treating us like an ATM machine. Years of only showing up when you needed something. Thomas was still crying, shaking his head. I don't understand. I thought you loved us. That broke me a little. I do love you. That's why I'm doing this. Because your father was right. We gave you so much that you learned to value nothing. Maybe losing everything will teach you what having everything never could. Fuck this, whoa, Marcus said, heading for the door. Fuck this and fuck you. You want to side with him over your own children, fine. But don't expect me to come around. Don't expect to see your grandchildren. You just destroyed this family. Your father's funeral was today, I said to his retreating back. The family was already destroyed. I'm just making it official. He slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. Claire followed, crying hysterically, her phone pressed to her ear, already calling someone, probably Jessica, probably needing sympathy and support and someone to tell her she wasn't a terrible person. Thomas lingered for a moment, looking lost and young despite being 40 years old. Mom, I really am sorry. I should have come. I know that now. Is there any way to fix this? I don't know, Tommy. Your father hoped this would be your wake-up call, that you'd all finally understand what really matters. But that's up to you now. The will stands. Your inheritance is $1. What you do with that information, how you grow from it, that's your choice. He nodded slowly, wiped his eyes, and left without another word. And then it was just me and Jonathan, in Richard's study, surrounded by the echoes of my children's anger and hurt and disbelief. That went about as well as expected, Jonathan said dryly. I laughed a broken sound. Richard warned me. He told me they'd hate me. He told me I'd become the villain. You did the right thing. Did I just lost my children, Jonathan. I just blew up my family. You enforced your husband's final wishes. You honored the man you loved. I looked at the photos on the wall again, all those smiling faces from years ago when things were simpler, when my children were still small enough to think I hung the moon. I hope he was right, I whispered. I hope this changes them. Because if it doesn't, if this just makes them bitter and angry, and we never reconcile, then I've lost everything. Richard's gone, and my children hate me, and I'm going to die alone in this giant house with $47 million and no one to share it with. Jonathan stood and put a hand on my shoulder. Give them time. Let them sit with this. Let them really feel what it's like to not have the safety net. And maybe, just maybe, they'll surprise you. After he left, I sat in Richard's chair and cried. Not gentle tears, but great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I cried for my husband, for my children, for the family we used to be, for the grandmother who might never see her grandchildren again. My phone started buzzing. Text messages from all 3 kids. From Claire's husband, from Marcus's wife. Angry messages, threatening messages, messages calling me every name in the book. I turned off my phone and walked upstairs to the bedroom I'd shared with Richard for 43 years. His side of the bed was still unmade from the hospital, his pillows still shaped to his head. I lay down on his side, pressed my face into his pillow that still smelled faintly like his cologne, and whispered into the empty room, I did it. I did what you asked, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Please let this work. Please let them learn. Please let them come back to me, changed and better and worthy of a second chance. Because I can't lose them forever, Richard. I can't. But the room was silent. Richard was gone. And I was alone with my choices and their consequences and $47 million that felt like blood money. Outside my window, the sun had set. The house was dark except for the one lamp I'd left on in the study. Tomorrow I would bury my husband with no one there to witness it. Tomorrow I would begin my new life as the villain in my children's story. Tomorrow I would start figuring out how to live with what I'd done. But tonight I just lay in the dark and mourned everything I'd lost in one terrible necessary day. I woke up the next morning to 237 text messages. I didn't read them. I already knew what they said. My children were angry. Their spouses were angry. My grandchildren's other grandparents were calling me selfish. Marcus's business partners wanted to know what was happening with the company. Claire's friends were posting vague messages on social media about toxic parents who manipulate their children even from the grave. I turned my phone off completely and got dressed for the burial. Black dress again, the same one from yesterday. It still smelled faintly of the funeral home of lilies and grief. I didn't bother with makeup. Who was I trying to look good for the cemetery workers? Jonathan picked me up at 9:30. He didn't ask if I was okay. We both knew I wasn't. The cemetery was beautiful in the morning light, all rolling hills and old oak trees. The kind of peaceful place Richard had chosen because he said he wanted somewhere pretty to spend eternity. We'd bought 6 plots together 15 years ago in a section with a view of a small pond. Richard had joked that at least he'd have decent scenery. The gravediggers had already done their work. There was a hole in the ground, perfectly rectangular, waiting for my husband. The casket sat on a lowering device gleaming in the sunlight. Peter from the funeral home was there looking tired. A different priest this time, younger, checking his phone between prayers. Just like yesterday, it was only me. I stood there as the priest read his generic passages as they lowered Richard into the ground, as the first shovel of dirt hit the casket with a hollow thump that made my stomach clench. I didn't cry. I'd run out of tears somewhere around 3 in the morning when I'd finally stopped reading my children's angry messages. When it was over, Peter approached me carefully like I might break. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do for you? You can send the final bill to my house. Thank you for everything, Peter. You've been very kind." He nodded and left, and then it was just me and Jonathan standing beside a fresh grave that no one else had cared enough to witness. "What now?" Jonathan asked quietly. "Now I wait. Richard said to give them time, so I'll wait. And if they don't come around, if they stay angry, then I'll know he was wrong about them, and I'll have to figure out how to live with that." We drove back to my empty house. Jonathan came in with me, probably worried I'd do something dramatic, but I just made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where Richard and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 43 years. "The business sale is moving forward," Jonathan said, sitting across from me. "The lead buyer's prepared to offer $32 million. That's a good price. Whatever you think is best." "Marcus has already retained counsel. He's filing a competency challenge." "Let him. Richard was prepared for that." "Claire's husband called my office 6 times yesterday. He wants to negotiate a severance package." "The will specifies his severance. 3 months as per company policy, not a penny more." "Thomas hasn't called at all." That surprised me. "Nothing?" "Nothing. His phone goes straight to voicemail." I felt a flutter of worry despite everything. Thomas was the baby, the most sensitive, the one most likely to do something stupid when he was hurt. "Can you check on him? Just make sure he's okay." "I'll send someone to his apartment." My phone buzzed. I'd turned it back on to see if Thomas had tried to reach me, but it wasn't Thomas. It was my daughter-in-law, Marcus's wife, Patricia. "We need to talk, today. It's about the kids." My grandchildren. Marcus and Patricia had 3. Emma was 12, Jake was 9, Sophie was 6. I loved them desperately, though I barely saw them anymore. Marcus had been keeping them away for years, always with excuses about sports schedules and homework and playdates. I typed back, "Now I'm outside." I went to the window and saw Patricia's Mercedes in my driveway. She was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at my house, her face hard. "She's here," I told Jonathan. "Patricia. Do you want me to stay?" "No, this is between us." I opened the door before she could knock. Patricia stood there in yoga pants and an expensive jacket, her blonde hair pulled back tight, her face carefully made up despite it being 10 in the morning. She'd always been beautiful in that sharp, calculated way. Marcus had fallen for her in college, had gotten her pregnant junior year, and Richard and I had paid for their wedding and their house and pretty much their entire life. "Margaret." She didn't hug me, didn't offer condolences, just pushed past me into the foyer. "We need to talk about this insanity." "Come in," I said dryly, closing the door. She whirled on me in the living room. How could you do this? How could you let Richard do this to Marcus? Do you have any idea what you've done to us? I'm aware of the will, yes. The will? That's what you're calling it. It's theft. Margaret, it's Richard stealing from his own son. Marcus has worked at that company for 22 years. 22 years. And now, Cal, he gets nothing. Just fired like some random employee. He gets 6 months severance. 6 months? Do you know what our monthly expenses are? Do you know what it costs to maintain our lifestyle? Then perhaps you need a cheaper lifestyle. Her eyes narrowed. This is about the funeral, isn't it? You're punishing us because Marcus couldn't make it. One day, Margaret. You're destroying our family over one day. Your husband chose golf over his father's funeral. He had a client meeting, an important deal. Richard always said business came first. And look how that turned out for Richard. He died alone except for his wife while his son was on a golf course. Patricia's face flushed. You're being ridiculous. People miss funerals all the time. It doesn't mean they didn't love the person. Marcus loved Richard. He's devastated. He's devastated about the money. Of course he's upset about the money. That money is his children's future. Emma wants to go to Yale. That's $90,000 a year. Jake needs braces and Sophie's in private school and we have a mortgage and car payments. And do you expect us to just figure it out on our own? That's generally what adults do, yes? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous. Listen to me very carefully. Marcus is going to fight this will. He's going to drag you through court. He's going to make your life hell. And if you think you're going to see your grandchildren while this is going on, you're delusional. There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. The grandchildren used as weapons. Are you threatening to keep my grandchildren from me unless I give Marcus his inheritance? I'm telling you the reality of the situation. Marcus is furious. He doesn't want the kids around someone who could do something so cruel to their own child. He thinks you're toxic. Something cold settled in my chest. Get out. Excuse me? Get out of my house, now, before I have you removed. You can't just kick me out. I'm family. You stopped being family the moment you threatened to use my grandchildren as leverage. You want to keep them from me, fine. Do it. But you don't get to stand in my house and make threats. Leave. Patricia stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe the Margaret she knew was the doormat who wrote checks and stayed quiet and let her children walk all over her. But that Margaret had died yesterday in an empty funeral home. You'll regret this, Patricia hissed. When Marcus takes you to court and drags Richard's name through the mud and tells everyone what kind of woman you really are, you'll regret this. I regret a lot of things, but honoring my husband's wishes isn't one of them. Goodbye, Patricia. She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the chandelier. I stood there, shaking adrenaline flooding my system, and realized I felt good. For the first time since Richard died, I felt something other than grief. I felt powerful. Jonathan appeared from the kitchen where he'd clearly been listening. That went well. She threatened my grandchildren. I heard. For what it's worth, she can't legally keep them from you. You have grandparents' rights. I'm not dragging my grandchildren into court. If Marcus wants to poison them against me, that's his choice. When they're older, when they understand, maybe they'll come find me. And if they don't, then Richard was wrong, and this whole thing was for nothing, and I destroyed my family for no reason. My voice broke on the last word. Jonathan crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. I stood stiff for a moment, then collapsed against him, letting someone else hold me up for just a minute. You did what Richard asked, he said quietly. That's all you can do. The rest is up to them. After Jonathan left, the house felt too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. I wandered through rooms Richard and I had filled with 43 years of memories. The living room where we'd hosted Christmas parties. The dining room where we'd had Sunday dinners back when the kids still came. The kitchen where Richard had made me coffee every single morning. I ended up in his study again, sitting in his chair, surrounded by his things. There was a photo on his desk I hadn't noticed before, tucked behind his computer monitor. It was from my 60th birthday party 10 years ago. All of us together, Marcus and Patricia and their kids, Claire and her husband David and their daughter, Thomas with whatever girlfriend he'd had at the time. We were all smiling, all happy, all together. When had it changed? When had that family turned into this? My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Harrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the police department. I'm calling about your son, Thomas Harrison. My blood went cold. What happened? Is he okay? He's fine, ma'am. He's here at the station. We picked him up about an hour ago for driving under the influence. He asked us to call you. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by anger. He was drunk driving. His blood alcohol was 0.15, nearly twice the legal limit. This is his second DUI, so he's looking at mandatory jail time unless he can post bail and get a good lawyer. His second. I didn't even know he'd had a first. How much is bail? $50,000. He said you'd help him, that his father always helped him with this kind of thing. His father always helped him. Of course Richard had. Another thing I hadn't known about another problem after Richard had made disappear with money instead of letting Thomas face consequences. Mrs. Harrison, are you there? I thought about the letter Richard had left me, about how he'd admitted enabling our children, about how he'd created this by always bailing them out, about how maybe losing everything would teach them what having everything never could. I'm here. Tell Thomas I'm not posting his bail. Silence on the other end. Ma'am, did you understand? He'll have to stay in jail until his arraignment. That could be 3 or 4 days. I understand perfectly. Tell him to call a bail bondsman if he wants out. Tell him his father is dead and the bank of mom and dad is closed. But he's your son. Yes, he is. And maybe 3 days in jail will teach him not to drive drunk. Is he allowed visitors? Yes, during visiting hours. Then I'll visit him tomorrow. But I'm not bailing him out. Not this time. I hung up before she could argue with me. My hands were shaking. I'd just left my baby boy in jail. My youngest child, the one I'd rocked to sleep and nursed through nightmares, and protected from everything. But Richard was right. I'd protected him too much. We both had. And now he was 40 years old, driving drunk in the middle of the day because his daddy had died and left him only $1. The house phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Margaret, it's David, Claire's husband, his voice tight and angry. I need to talk to you about this situation. What situation? Don't play dumb. The will, the company, my job, you're destroying our lives. Richard is the one who made the will. But you're the one enforcing it. You could change it. Jonathan said you have the power to amend anything as executor. You're choosing to do this. He was right. I could change everything if I wanted. I could give them their inheritances, keep the company, make sure David kept his job. I had that power. Richard knew I could change it, I said slowly. He trusted me to follow through anyway, to be strong enough to do what he couldn't do while he was alive. What he couldn't do, you mean screw over his own children. I mean stop enabling them. Stop making everything easy. Stop protecting them from consequences. Consequences, Jesus Christ? Margaret, we have a mortgage, we have bills. Claire's business depends on our line of credit, and that line of credit depends on my job. You're not teaching us some valuable lesson. You're destroying our financial stability. Then I guess you'll need to find another job. There aren't any other jobs, not in this economy, not for someone with my experience level. I'm 50 years old. Margaret, do you know how hard it is to find work at 50? I thought about Richard starting his business at 40 with nothing but a pickup truck and a dream. I thought about how hard he'd worked, how many 18-hour days he'd put in, how many times he'd risked everything. Then maybe you'll have to take a job that's below your experience level. Maybe Claire will have to close her boutique that barely breaks even and get a real job. Maybe you'll have to sell your house and rent an apartment. Maybe you'll have to live like normal people instead of the privileged life Richard's money provided. You're heartless. You know that Richard's barely cold in the ground, and you're already destroying everything he built. Richard destroyed it himself when he wrote that will. I'm just the messenger. Well, here's a message for you. Claire is done. She doesn't want to see you. She doesn't want to talk to you. You're dead to her. The words hit like a slap, but I kept my voice steady. Then I guess Richard was right about her too. David hung up on me. I sat there holding the phone, counting my losses. Marcus threatening to sue me and keep my grandchildren away. Claire cutting me off completely. Thomas in jail for drunk driving. 3 children, all of them gone in less than 24 hours. I should have felt devastated. I should have been crying. Should have been reconsidering. Should have been calling Jonathan and telling him to rewrite the will to give them what they wanted. But all I felt was tired. Bone deep exhausted. Tired of fighting. Tired of being the villain. Tired of doing the hard thing that everyone else thought was wrong. I went upstairs and lay down in Richard's bed again, pressed my face into his pillow, and fell asleep in the middle of the afternoon like an old woman who had nothing left to live for. I dreamed about Richard. He was young again, the way he'd looked when we first met, tall and handsome with all his hair and that smile that had made me fall in love with him instantly. We were walking on a beach somewhere holding hands, and he kept telling me something, but I couldn't hear him over the sound of the waves. When I woke up, it was dark outside, and someone was pounding on my front door. I stumbled downstairs, disoriented and still half asleep. Through the window, I could see Claire's car in the driveway and Claire herself hammering on the door like she was trying to break it down. I opened it and she pushed past me, her eyes wild, her perfect makeup smeared from crying. "Tommy's in jail, honey," she said, her voice breaking. "Tommy's in jail and you won't bail him out. What is wrong with you?" "He was driving drunk, again." "So what?" "He made a mistake. He's dealing with Dad's death. He's hurting." "He could have killed someone, Claire. He could have crashed into a family, into children, into someone else's father on their way home from work." "But he didn't. He didn't hurt anyone. Why are you punishing him?" "I'm not punishing him. I'm letting him face the consequences of his actions." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You've never done that before. You and Dad always fixed everything. When Marcus got that DUI, you made it go away. When I crashed Dad's car, you bought me a new one. When Tommy got fired, you got him another job. You've always fixed things." "I know, and look what it got us. 3 middle-aged children who think they're entitled to everything and responsible for nothing." Claire's face crumpled. "I can't do this. I can't handle Tommy in jail, and Dad dead, and you acting like some kind of monster. I need my mom. I need you to help us like you always do." For a moment, I wavered. This was my baby girl standing in front of me, crying, begging for help. Every instinct I had screamed at me to fix it, to make it better, to write the check and solve the problem. But Richard's voice was in my head. Make them earn it. Make them prove they've learned. "What do you want me to do, Claire?" "Post Tommy's bail. Give Marcus the company, or at least enough money to feel secure. Let David keep his job. Go back to being our mom instead of whoever this is." "And what do I get?" She blinked, confused. "What do you mean? What do you get? What do I get in return? Do I get apologies for missing your father's funeral? Do I get my children to actually show up when I need them? Do I get grandchildren who know my name? Or do I just get to keep writing checks and being ignored until you need something else?" "That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me, Claire, when was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for something, not to invite me to something where you needed me to write a check for charity, just called because you wanted to hear your mother's voice." She opened her mouth and closed it again. We both knew the answer. "I thought so. You want me to go back to being the ATM machine, the problem solver, the magic checkbook that makes everything better. But that's not a mother, Claire. That's a bank." "I'm not like that. I love you." "Then prove it. Go visit your brother in jail. Sit with him. Talk to him. Be there for him without me having to pay for it." "I can't. I have the boutique and Jessica's wedding is this weekend and I have so much to do." And there it was again. Always something more important than family. Always another obligation. Always another excuse. "Then I guess you don't love him as much as you think you do." Her eyes hardened. "You're going to regret this. When you're old and alone and none of us will take your calls when you're dying in some hospital with no one holding your hand, you're going to remember this moment and wish you'd been a better mother." "I'm already old and alone, Claire. Your father died with only me beside him. That was my preview of what's coming. At least I'll die knowing I honored his wishes. What will you die knowing?" She turned and ran back to her car, sobbing so hard she could barely see. I watched her peel out of the driveway and wondered if that was the last time I'd ever see my daughter. The next morning, I drove to the county jail. It was a grim concrete building that smelled like disinfectant and despair. I'd never been to a jail before. Never had any reason to. Richard had always handled the one time Marcus had gotten arrested, had made it all go away before I even knew about it. I sat in a plastic chair in the visiting room and waited. Around me were other families, mothers and wives and girlfriends, all looking tired and sad. This was their normal. Coming to visit their men in jail, bringing news from the outside, promising things would get better. Thomas appeared on the other side of the glass, looking like hell. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was greasy, he had a bruise on his cheek. He picked up the phone and I picked up mine. "Hey, Mom." His voice was small. "Hey, baby. Did you come to get me out?" "No." His face fell. "Mom, please. It's horrible in here. I'm in a cell with this guy who keeps threatening me. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Please just post bail. I'll pay you back." "With what money?" "I don't know. I'll get a job. I'll figure it out. Please, Mom, I'm begging you." I looked at my youngest child, my baby, and saw a stranger. A 40-year-old man who'd never had to fight for anything, who'd never had to sacrifice anything, who'd never had to be uncomfortable for more than 5 minutes before Mommy and Daddy fixed it. "Your father bailed you out the last time you got a DUI. Did you know I didn't even know about it? He paid $20,000 to make it disappear. Paid your lawyer, paid the fines, paid to get it expunged from your record. I found out 3 days ago when the detective mentioned this was your second one." Thomas looked down. "Dad said not to tell you. He said you'd just worry. He was protecting you. We both were. Always protecting you from your own choices. And look where it got us." "I made a mistake, Mom. I was upset about Dad, and I had a few drinks, and I thought I was okay to drive. It was stupid. I know it was stupid, but I learned my lesson. Please don't make me stay in here." "What lesson did you learn, Tommy? That driving drunk is bad because you should have learned that the first time. You should have learned that without having to get arrested at all. Most people manage to go their whole lives without driving drunk even once." His face flushed with anger. "So what, you're just going to leave me in here, your own son?" "For 3 days, yes, until your arraignment. Then you'll have to figure out bail on your own or stay in until trial." "I don't have money for bail. Dad left me $1. "Then I guess you'll need to call a bail bondsman or stay in jail. Those are your options." "You're really going to do this? You're really going to abandon me?" "I'm not abandoning you. I'm letting you face the consequences of driving drunk, something your father and I should have done the first time." He slammed the phone down and stood up, his face twisted with rage. He said something I couldn't hear through the glass, but I could read his lips well enough. He called me a word no son should ever call his mother. Then he turned and let the guard lead him away. I sat there for a long time after he left the phone still in my hand, wondering if I'd just destroyed my relationship with my youngest child forever. When I got home, there was a process server waiting on my porch. Marcus's lawsuit. That was fast. I took the papers inside and read them. He was suing me for undue influence, claiming I'd manipulated Richard while he was dying, poisoned him against his children, coerced him into changing his will. He was demanding the will be thrown out and the estate divided equally among his children as it should have been. I called Jonathan. I got served. I know. Marcus's lawyer called me this morning to let me know it was coming. Very professional of him. Jonathan's voice was dry. Can he win? No. Richard was incredibly thorough. We have the video testimony, the cognitive assessments, the doctor's affidavits. We have his original will from 10 years ago showing he'd been moving in this direction for a while. We have documentation of every time he bailed the kids out, every loan he made, every problem he solved with money. He built a paper trail showing exactly why he made the changes he did. So this is just going to be expensive and ugly. Very expensive and very ugly. Marcus has retained one of the best estate litigation attorneys in the state. This is going to cost you hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Do it, whatever it takes. Richard wanted this will to stand, and I'm going to make sure it does. Even if it means losing your children. I thought about that, really thought about it. Could I live the rest of my life without my children, without my grandchildren, alone in this big house with all this money and no one to share it with? But then I thought about Richard in his final days, weak and dying, telling me that none of them would come. I thought about standing in that empty funeral home. I thought about him saying, maybe this would wake them up. Maybe this would teach them. Maybe this would save them. Even if it means losing them. Because if I give in now, if I let Marcus bully me into changing the will, then Richard died for nothing. His last wish, his last hope that they might learn and grow and become better people, all of it would be for nothing. I can't do that to him. All right then, I'll respond to the lawsuit. This is going to take months, maybe a year. Are you prepared for that? I don't have a choice. After I hung up with Jonathan, I did something I hadn't done in 43 years. I left the house without telling anyone where I was going. Richard and I had always kept each other informed, always checked in, always been accountable to each other. But Richard was gone and my children didn't care where I was, so I just got in my car and drove. I ended up at the beach house in Malibu. It was a 3-hour drive, and by the time I got there, the sun was setting, painting the ocean in shades of orange and gold. The house was exactly as we'd left it 6 months ago, before Richard got too sick to travel. I walked through the rooms touching things. The kitchen where we'd made breakfast looking out at the waves. The deck where we'd had sunset cocktails. The bedroom where we'd made love with the windows open and the sound of the ocean filling the room. This had been Marcus's favorite place. He'd begged us to give it to him, to let him have it, to deed it over. And now it was mine, and he would never set foot in it again unless he paid market rate. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt sad. I spent the night there sleeping in the master bedroom, listening to the waves. In the morning, I walked on the beach, something I hadn't done in years. There were other people out, joggers and dog walkers and families playing in the surf. Normal people living normal lives. People who probably didn't have $47 million or children who hated them or dead husbands who'd blown up their families from beyond the grave. My phone rang. Jonathan again. Margaret, I have some news. Thomas made bail. How? He doesn't have any money. Someone posted it for him. I don't know who, but he's out. Relief flooded through me, even though I knew I shouldn't feel relieved. Did he call you? No, I just got a notification from the court. I thought you should know. So Thomas was out, but he hadn't called me, hadn't thanked me for visiting even though I wouldn't post bail, hadn't apologized for what he'd said, just took someone else's money and got out and went on with his life. Anything else? Yes, the business sale is moving forward. The buyer wants to close in 30 days. Once that happens, you'll have about $24 million deposited into your account after taxes and fees. $24 million. Added to the $23 million I already had from everything else. $47 million total. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and no one to share it with. Also, I got a call from Claire. She wants to meet with you. My heart jumped. She does. She says she wants to talk, just the two of you. She asked if you'd meet her tomorrow for lunch. Did she say what about? No, but Margaret, be careful. This could be genuine, or it could be another attempt to manipulate you into changing the will. I know, but she's still my daughter. I have to try. The next day, I drove back to the city and met Claire at a restaurant we used to go to when she was younger, back when we'd had mother-daughter lunches and actually enjoyed each other's company. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table wearing sunglasses even though we were inside. She took them off when I sat down, and I saw she'd been crying. Her eyes were puffy, her face blotchy despite her makeup. Thanks for coming, she said quietly. Of course, you're my daughter. We ordered, made small talk about nothing, the weather, the traffic, anything but the giant elephant sitting at the table with us. Finally, after the food came, Claire put down her fork and looked at me. I've been thinking about what you said, about the last time I called you just to talk. I waited. It's been 8 months. 8 months since I called you without wanting something. Without asking you to donate to some charity or come to some event or help with something. I didn't even realize it until you said it, but you're right. Claire? No, let me finish. I've been so angry at you. So angry about the will and Dad and all of it. But then Jessica's bachelorette party happened and I realized something. What? I didn't even have fun. The whole time I was there, all I could think about was that Dad was dead and I was at a party. And then I got your text about the funeral, and I told myself it was fine that Dad would understand that it was just bad timing. But he wouldn't have understood. And it wasn't bad timing. I chose a party over my father's funeral. She was crying now, real tears, not the manipulative ones from before. I chose wrong, Mom. I chose so wrong, and I can't take it back. And now Dad's dead, and I never got to say goodbye, and it's all my fault. I reached across the table and took her hand. It's not all your fault, sweetheart. Your dad and I made mistakes, too. We gave you too much, made everything too easy, never taught you that actions have consequences. But I'm 43 years old. I should know better. I shouldn't need my parents to teach me that showing up for family is more important than a party. No, you shouldn't. But here we are. She squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. For missing the funeral. For only caring about the money. For being the daughter you deserved better than. This was it. This was what Richard had hoped for. One of them understanding one of them, learning one of them, growing from this. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. We cried together there in the restaurant, probably making a scene, but I didn't care. This was my daughter really seeing me for the first time in years, really understanding what she'd done. I can't change Dad's will, I said after we'd both composed ourselves. I won't. He wanted this for a reason, and I have to honor that. Claire nodded. I know, I get it now. Really get it. And honestly, I don't deserve an inheritance. Not after what I did. The pearl necklace and $1 is more than I should get. But I could hear there was a but coming. But David is freaking out. He lost his job and we're not going to be able to make our mortgage payments. And I don't know what to do. I'm not asking you to change the will. I'm just asking if there's any way you could help us figure this out. And there it was. The test. Was this real growth or just another manipulation? Was Claire genuinely sorry, or was she just saying what I wanted to hear to get money? I thought about what Richard would do, about what his letter had said, make them earn it. I'll tell you what, you and David sell your house. Find something you can actually afford on your own incomes without my help. David gets whatever job he can get, even if it's not what he thinks he deserves. You close the boutique that's been losing money for 3 years and get a real job. You live within your means. You do that for 6 months and show me you can be responsible adults. Then maybe I'll help with something small, but not before." Claire's face showed her struggle. She wanted to argue, wanted to push, wanted me to just fix it like I always had, but something had changed in her. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, that's fair. We'll figure it out. And Claire, I need you to testify for me in Marcus's lawsuit." Her eyes widened. "What?" "Marcus is suing me, claiming I manipulated your father. I need you to testify that Richard was of sound mind, that this is what he wanted, that I didn't influence him. Will you do that?" She nodded slowly. Yeah, I will. Because it's the truth. Dad knew exactly what he was doing." We finished lunch and hugged in the parking lot, and for the first time since Richard died, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe this would work. Maybe losing everything would teach them what having everything never could, but 1 out of 3 wasn't enough. I still had 2 sons who hated me and a lawsuit to fight and a long road ahead before any of this could be resolved. I drove home thinking about Richard's letter, about his hope that they'd learn about his faith, that this would ultimately make them better people. I just hoped I lived long enough to find out if he was right. 2 weeks after my lunch with Claire Marcus's lawyer took my deposition. 6 hours in a conference room with cameras rolling and a stenographer typing every word while some shark in a $3,000 suit tried to make me look like a manipulative monster who'd stolen my children's birthright. "Mrs. Harrison, isn't it true that you were the primary caregiver during your husband's final illness?" "Yes." "And you were alone with him for hours every day?" "Yes." "Hours during which you could have said anything to him, suggested anything, influenced him in any way you chose." Jonathan put his hand on my arm, but I didn't need the warning. I was caring for my dying husband, giving him his medications, helping him to the bathroom, holding his hand when he was in pain. If you think that's manipulation, then you have a very different definition of the word than I do. Marcus's lawyer, a woman named Jennifer Chen, who looked like she ate opposing counsel for breakfast, smiled coldly. "But you were also the one who arranged for him to meet with Mr. Blackwood to revise his will, weren't you? Richard arranged that himself. I just made the phone call because his hands were shaking too badly to dial." How convenient that there's no way to verify that. There's a phone record showing my husband called Jonathan's office himself 3 days before I made the follow-up call. Perhaps you should check your discovery materials more carefully. Jennifer's smile tightened. She pulled out a stack of papers. "Let's talk about the timing of the will revision. Your husband changed his will on August 15th. What happened on August 13th? I glanced at Jonathan. He nodded slightly. "That was the day Marcus promised to visit and didn't show up. Richard had been excited all week. He'd asked me to make his favorite meal. He wanted to talk to Marcus about the business, about succession planning. Marcus called an hour before he was supposed to arrive and said he had a better offer for dinner. A client wanted to take him to some expensive steakhouse. And you're saying that single incident prompted your husband to disinherit his children? I'm saying it was the final incident in a long pattern, but it was particularly cruel because Richard knew he was dying. He'd just gotten the prognosis that he had maybe 3 months left. He wanted to see his son, and his son chose a free steak over him. Yet, you claim this wasn't discussed with your husband. You didn't say anything about how terrible it was that Marcus had canceled. I didn't have to say anything. Richard cried for an hour after Marcus called. Then he called Jonathan and said he wanted to revise his will immediately. I didn't influence that decision. Marcus did. Jennifer switched tactics. Let's discuss the funeral arrangements. You planned a funeral you knew your children couldn't attend, didn't you? Excuse me? Your son had a long-scheduled business meeting. Your daughter was the maid of honor at a wedding. Your youngest son was on a vacation he'd booked months in advance. Yet you scheduled the funeral at a time when none of them could make it. I felt rage building in my chest. My husband died on a Monday. I scheduled his funeral for Wednesday, which is completely normal. If my children's golf games and parties and vacations were more important than saying goodbye to their father, that's not my fault. But you could have waited. You could have scheduled it for the following week when they were all available. You want me to have left my husband in a morgue for a week so my children could finish their vacation and their party? That's not how funerals work. That's not how death works. You show up when someone dies. You cancel your plans. You say goodbye. That's what family does. Unless the family is being manipulated by a bitter woman who wanted to punish her children. Jonathan stood up. That's enough. You're badgering my client. Mrs. Harrison has answered your questions honestly. If you have relevant questions about the will, ask them. Otherwise, we're done here." Jennifer smiled. "Oh, we're far from done. Let's talk about the money, Mrs. Harrison. $47 million. That's quite a windfall for someone who contributed nothing to building the business. I contributed 43 years of marriage. I contributed raising 3 children while Richard built his company. I contributed running a household and hosting clients and being the perfect corporate wife. If you think that's nothing, you've clearly never been married. But you didn't work. You didn't earn a salary. You didn't build the business. I built the home that made it possible for Richard to build the business. I gave him the stability and support he needed to take risks and work 18-hour days. That was my job, and I did it well. Better than my children apparently learned to do theirs. So you admit you feel your children failed? I admit they failed to show up to their father's funeral. Everything else is just details." The deposition went on for another 3 hours. Jennifer tried every angle, twisted, every answer made me repeat things over and over, hoping I'd contradict myself. But Jonathan had prepared me well, and I stuck to the truth. Richard had been of sound mind. Richard had made his own decisions. I had not influenced him. The will was valid. When it was finally over, I felt like I'd been beaten with a stick. Jonathan drove me home because I was shaking too badly to drive myself. "You did great," he said as we pulled into my driveway. "You were calm, consistent, and credible. Jennifer couldn't rattle you." "She tried, though." "That's her job. But here's what matters. She's got nothing. No evidence of manipulation, no proof of diminished capacity, nothing but angry children who didn't get what they expected. Marcus's lawsuit isn't going anywhere." "Then why do I feel like I'm losing?" Jonathan turned to look at me. "Because you are losing. Not the lawsuit, but your family. And no amount of money makes that feel like winning." He was right. I went inside my empty house and sat in Richard's chair and cried until I had no tears left. Then I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding. I looked at my grandchildren's social media accounts. Emma, my oldest grandchild, had posted a photo from a few days ago. She was holding a sign that said "Justice for Grandpa," and underneath she'd written, "My grandma stole our inheritance. She manipulated my dying grandfather, and now she's keeping all his money. Please share this so everyone knows what kind of person she really is." The post had been shared 3,000 times. The comments were vicious. People calling me a gold digger, a manipulator, a thief. People saying I should be in jail, that I was evil, that I deserved to die alone. Marcus had put her up to it, had to have. Emma was 12 years old. She didn't understand estates or wills or inheritance. She just knew her father told her grandma was bad, and she believed him. I closed the laptop before I could read any more. But the damage was done. My granddaughter hated me, or at least thought she did. And thousands of strangers hated me too based on one side of a story they knew nothing about. My phone rang. Unknown number again, but I answered anyway. "Mrs. Harrison, this is Melissa Torres from Channel 7 News. We're doing a story on estate disputes, and we understand you're currently involved in a high-profile case with your children. Would you be willing to comment?" "No." "Your son Marcus has agreed to an interview. He's going to tell his side of the story. Don't you want to tell yours?" "No." "He's claiming you manipulated your dying husband into cutting out his children, that you isolated him from his family, that you're keeping millions of dollars that rightfully belong to them. You really don't want to respond to that. Marcus can say whatever he wants. The truth will come out in court. But by then, public opinion will have already decided. Don't you care what people think of you?" I thought about that. Did I care? Should I care? Thousands of people already thought I was terrible based on a 12-year-old's social media post. What difference would a news story make? I care what my husband thought of me. I care that I'm honoring his wishes. I don't care what strangers think. What about your children? Don't you care what they think? If my children cared what I thought, they would have shown up to their father's funeral. Goodbye, Ms. Torres. I hung up and immediately called Jonathan. Marcus is going on the news. I know, his lawyer called to give me a heads up. It's a pressure tactic. He's hoping public opinion will force you to settle. Will it work? Not unless you let it. Margaret, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. Marcus is going to paint you as a villain. The story is going to be everywhere. Your friends will see it. Your neighbors will see it. Random strangers at the grocery store will recognize you. I don't have friends anymore. Richard was my best friend, and he's dead. Everyone else was just acquaintances we collected over the years. What about your sister? Patricia. I hadn't talked to my sister since Richard's funeral that she hadn't attended. She'd sent flowers and a card that said, "Thinking of you," like Richard was someone she barely knew instead of her brother-in-law of 43 years. "I don't want to talk about Patricia. Margaret, you can't do this alone. You need support. You need people on your side. I have you. I'm your lawyer, not your friend. Well, I am your friend, but you need more than that. You need family. My family is suing me. Not all of them. Claire is on your side. And what about Thomas? Have you heard from him since he got out of jail?" "No, nothing. He's avoiding me." "Maybe you should reach out. Maybe he needs to hear from you, kid." I thought about Thomas in that jail, scared and angry and calling me names through the glass. He made it pretty clear he doesn't want to hear from me. He was scared and lashing out. Give him another chance. After Jonathan left, I sat there thinking about Thomas. My baby boy. The surprise pregnancy when I was 40 and thought I was done having kids. He'd been such a sweet child. Sensitive and artistic. Always drawing pictures and making up stories. Somewhere along the way, that creative little boy had turned into a man who couldn't hold a job and drank too much and drove drunk in the middle of the day. Where had I gone wrong with him? With all of them, what had Richard and I done that turned 3 innocent children into these entitled strangers? I pulled out my phone and texted Thomas. "I love you. I'm here if you want to talk." 3 dots appeared immediately, like he'd been waiting for me to reach out. Then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Then disappeared. He was typing and deleting, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, after 5 minutes, a message came through. "Can we meet tomorrow, just us?" My heart leaped. "Yes, anywhere you want. The park near your house, the one with the pond, noon. I'll be there." I barely slept that night, too anxious about seeing Thomas, too worried about what he might say. Was he going to apologize, yell at me, beg for money? I had no idea, but I was desperate to see him. Haunt him to have at least one more of my children talking to me. The next morning, Marcus's interview aired on the local news. I watched it even though Jonathan had told me not to. Marcus sat in his expensive living room, looking grief-stricken, and betrayed Patricia beside him, holding his hand, both of them playing their parts perfectly. "My father was a great man," Marcus said, his voice breaking convincingly. "He built an empire from nothing. He was my hero, my mentor, everything I aspired to be. And in his final days, when he was weak and medicated and scared, my mother poisoned him against his own children." The reporter, a sympathetic young woman who clearly believed every word, leaned forward. "That must have been devastating for you." "It was. It is. My father and I were supposed to run the company together. He'd been grooming me for years to take over. We had plans, dreams for the future, and then suddenly he changed his will and left everything to my mother. Cut us out completely. Left each of us exactly $1 like we meant nothing to him. Your mother claims you missed your father's funeral. Is that true?" Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. "I made a terrible mistake. I had a business meeting I thought I couldn't miss. I thought I'd have other chances to say goodbye, that Dad had more time. I was wrong, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But that doesn't justify what my mother did. That doesn't justify her stealing our inheritance. She says she's just honoring your father's wishes." "My father's wishes were manipulated. He wasn't in his right mind. He was scared and in pain, and my mother took advantage of that. She isolated him from us, turned him against us, and now she's keeping $47 million that should have been divided among his children." The interview went on for another 5 minutes, with Marcus painting himself as the grieving son betrayed by a manipulative mother. Patricia cried on camera. They showed photos of Richard with the kids when they were young, all happy and smiling. They made it look like a loving family torn apart by one woman's greed. The comment section online was even worse than Emma's post. People calling me every name imaginable, saying I should be arrested, saying someone should take justice into their own hands. Actual death threats mixed in with the general vitriol. I turned it all off and drove to the park to meet Thomas. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench by the pond, throwing pieces of bread to the ducks, even though there was a sign saying not to feed them. He looked thin, like he'd lost weight in just 2 weeks. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He looked like someone who was barely holding it together. "Hey, Mom," he said, without looking at me as I sat down beside him. "Hey, baby." We sat in silence for a long time, watching the ducks fight over the bread. Finally, Thomas spoke. "I saw Marcus's interview." "So did I." "He's full of shit, you know. Dad wasn't manipulated. Dad knew exactly what he was doing." I turned to look at him, surprised. "You think so?" "I know so. Dad tried to talk to me about it a month before he died. Called me up, asked me to come over, said he wanted to discuss something important. I blew him off. Told him I was busy, that we'd talk later. He said it was about the will and what would happen after he was gone, and I said, Dad, you're not dying anytime soon. We have plenty of time to talk about that boring stuff. Except he was dying, and we didn't have time, and I never called him back. His voice broke on the last words. He wanted to prepare me. He wanted to explain why he was doing what he was doing. He wanted to give me a chance to understand, and I couldn't even give him an hour of my time because I was too busy doing nothing important. Tommy, I'm an alcoholic, Mom. I've known it for years, but I wouldn't admit it, and Dad knew it too. That's why he left me the Purple Heart. He wanted me to understand what real sacrifice looks like, what real courage looks like. He wanted me to know that I need to fight this, that I need to get help, that I need to become someone worthy of wearing that medal, even if it's just metaphorically. I took his hand. It was shaking. Are you drinking now? No? I've been sober since I got out of jail. 9 days. It's the longest I've gone without a drink in 3 years. I'm proud of you. Don't be proud yet. 9 days is nothing. Ask me again in 9 months. I will, and I'll be proud then too. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of tears. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry about the funeral. I'm sorry about Cabo. I'm sorry about what I said to you in jail. I'm sorry about all of it. Dad was right to leave me $1. I don't deserve anything more. Your father didn't do it to punish you. He did it to wake you up. Well, it worked. I'm awake now. Question is, what do I do about it? You get help. You get sober. You figure out who you want to be, and then you become that person? What if I can't? What if I'm too broken? You're not broken. You're lost. There's a difference. Lost people can find their way back. Thomas wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Marcus wants me to testify against you in the lawsuit. He says if I do, he'll give me part of his share when he wins. Says I could walk away with $5 million. My heart sank. What did you tell him? I told him to go fuck himself. You didn't manipulate Dad. Dad was the smartest, most clear-headed person I ever knew right up until the end. He made his choice, and it was the right choice, even if it hurts. Marcus is just pissed because for once in his life, Daddy isn't going to bail him out. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because it's the truth, and because for once in my life, I want to do the right thing even when it's hard. We sat there holding hands like we used to when he was little and scared of thunderstorms or bad dreams. My youngest child, my baby, the one I'd worried about most. Maybe Richard had been right about him too. Maybe hitting rock bottom was exactly what he needed. I'm going to rehab, Thomas said after a while, real rehab. 3 months in a facility. I called yesterday and they have a spot opening up next week. It costs $40,000 and I obviously don't have that kind of money, so I was wondering... He trailed off, embarrassed to be asking me for money after everything that had happened. I'll pay for it, I said immediately. On one condition. His face fell. What? You stay the full 3 months. No checking out early. No leaving against medical advice. You commit to the full program. That's it. That's your only condition. That's it. Because this isn't me enabling you. This is me helping you help yourself. There's a difference. Thomas hugged me, then really hugged me, the kind of hug he hadn't given me since he was a teenager. Thank you, Mom. I won't let you down. You're not letting me down. You're saving yourself. I'm just paying the bill. After Thomas left, I sat on that bench for a long time, feeling like maybe, just maybe, Richard's plan was working. 2 out of 3 children were starting to understand. 2 out of 3 were growing and changing and learning. That wasn't perfect, but it was something. My phone rang. Jonathan again. Margaret, we have a problem. What now? Patricia got a restraining order. She's claiming you've been harassing her and the children. The judge granted a temporary order. You're not allowed within 500 feet of Marcus's house or the kids' school. I felt like I'd been punched. I haven't contacted them at all. I haven't called, haven't texted, haven't driven by their house, nothing. I know, it's a tactical move. They're building a narrative that you're unstable and dangerous. When we get to court, they're going to use this restraining order as evidence that even your own family is afraid of you. Can they do that? They can try. We'll fight it at the hearing next week. But Margaret, you need to be careful. Don't go anywhere near Marcus's house. Don't try to contact the grandchildren. Don't do anything that could be construed as violating the order. I just want to see my grandchildren. I haven't seen them in weeks. I know, but right now you need to be patient. When we win this lawsuit, when the will is upheld, then you can work on rebuilding those relationships. But right now you have to play the long game. The long game. That's what my life had become. A chess match where my children were my opponents and my grandchildren were pawns being used against me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma and Jake and Sophie, about how they were being told lies about me, about how they probably believed I was a monster. They were young enough that by the time this was all over, by the time the truth came out, they might not remember what I was really like. They might only remember the villain their father had created. Around 2 in the morning, I got out of bed and went down to Richard's study. I pulled out a box of old photos from the closet pictures from when the kids were young. Here was Marcus at 6, missing his front teeth, holding up a fish he'd caught with Richard. Here was Claire at 10, dressed as a princess for Halloween, Richard beside her, dressed as a dragon. Here was Thomas at 3, covered in mud, laughing hysterically while Richard tried to hose him off in the backyard. When had that father, that loving, present father, turned into the workaholic who was never home? When had those sweet children turned into adults who valued money over everything I found? What I was looking for at the bottom of the box. A letter Richard had written to me on our 20th anniversary, back before he'd gotten too busy to write love letters back when he'd still taken time for romance. My dearest Margaret, it began, 20 years ago today I married my best friend. You've given me 3 beautiful children, a home full of love, and a reason to work so hard building a future for our family. Every dollar I make, every deal I close, every building I develop, it's all for you, for us, for the legacy we'll leave our children. I promise to never forget what really matters. I promise to always put family first. I love you more than words can say. Forever, yours, Richard. I promise to never forget what really matters. I promise to always put family first. But he had forgotten. We both had. Somewhere in the middle of building an empire we'd lost sight of. Why we were building it in the first place. We'd given our children everything except the one thing they really needed, which was parents who were present, who set boundaries, who taught them that some things were more important than money. And now Richard was dead, and I was left cleaning up the mess we'd both made. I put the letter back in the box and carried it upstairs. In my bedroom, I opened Richard's closet. His clothes still hung there, his shoes still lined up neatly on the floor. I hadn't been able to bring myself to give anything away yet. It felt too final, too much like admitting he was really gone. I pulled out one of his shirts, a soft flannel one he'd worn on weekends, and held it to my face. It still smelled like him, like his cologne and laundry detergent, and something uniquely Richard. I climbed back into bed wearing his shirt and cried myself to sleep. The next morning I woke to someone pounding on my door. I stumbled downstairs in Richard's shirt and my pajama pants to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. Margaret Harrison. Yes? Ma'am, we have a warrant to search your home. I stared at them in confusion. A warrant for what? Your son Marcus Harrison has filed a complaint alleging you're in possession of documents and assets that belong to him. We have a court order to search the premises and seize any relevant materials. This couldn't be happening. I need to call my lawyer. You're welcome to do that, ma'am, but we're coming in either way. You can let us in voluntarily, or we'll have to force entry. I stepped aside and let them in, then immediately called Jonathan. He was there in 20 minutes, looking angry in a way I'd never seen him. This is harassment, he told the officers. My client is the executor of the estate. All assets and documents are legally hers. You have no grounds for this search. We have a warrant signed by a judge, the lead officer said calmly. If you have an issue with it, take it up with the court. They spent 4 hours going through my house. They took Richard's laptop, his files from his study boxes of financial records, even his personal journals from the last year. They photographed everything cataloged. Everything treated my home like a crime scene. When they finally left, my house looked like it had been ransacked. Jonathan and I stood in the wreckage of Richard's study papers everywhere, file cabinets, open drawers pulled out. They won't find anything, Jonathan said, because there's nothing to find. All the estate documents are in my office. Marcus knows that. This is just intimidation. It's working. Margaret, you need to fight back. You can't just keep taking these hits. Let me file a countersuit. Harassment, defamation, abuse of process. We can make this hurt for Marcus. No. Why not? He's declared war on you. You have every right to defend yourself. Because he's still my son. Because somewhere underneath all this anger and entitlement is the little boy I raised. I'm not going to destroy him, even if he's trying to destroy me. He doesn't deserve your mercy. Probably not, but Richard's will wasn't about what they deserve. It was about what they need to learn. And me destroying Marcus in court won't teach him anything except that his mother is vindictive. Jonathan shook his head. You're a better person than I am. I'm a mother. It's different. After Jonathan left to file a motion to get my property returned, I tried to clean up the mess the police had made. but I kept finding things that broke my heart. Richard's reading glasses with one lens cracked from where the police had carelessly tossed them aside. His favorite pen, the one I'd given him for our 30th anniversary, now broken. Little violations that felt deeply personal, even though I knew the officers were just doing their job. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Mom, I just heard about the raid. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I stared at the message, surprised. Claire asking if I needed her instead of the other way around. That was new. "I'm okay. House is a mess, but I'm fine. I'm coming over. Don't argue." She showed up 30 minutes later with cleaning supplies and takeout food. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone," she said, looking at the disaster that was Richard's study. "Let me help." We worked together for hours, putting things back, reorganizing files, restoring order to chaos. She didn't ask about the will or money or any of it. She just helped her mother clean up after her brother had sent police to raid her home. "I testified yesterday," Claire said as we were finishing up, "in Marcus's lawsuit. His lawyer deposed me." "What did you say?" "The truth. That Dad was completely lucid. That he knew exactly what he was doing. That you didn't manipulate him. Jennifer Chen tried to get me to say otherwise, tried to suggest you'd pressured me or threatened me, but I wouldn't budge." "Thank you." Marcus called me after. He was furious. Said I'd betrayed the family, that I'd chosen you over him, that I'd regret it. I told him he was the one who should have regrets. That he missed Dad's funeral for golf, and now he wants to blame everyone else for the consequences. What did he say to that? He hung up on me, haven't heard from him since. Patricia called, though, said I was dead to them, that I'd never see my nieces and nephew again, that they were going to make sure everyone knew what a traitor I was. Claire's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. This was costing her. Standing up for what was right was costing her relationships, family connections, her place in the only tribe she'd ever known. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I'm sorry you're losing them because of me." "I'm not losing them because of you. I'm losing them because they can't accept that actions have consequences. That's not your fault, or Dad's fault. That's on them." We ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor of Richard's study, surrounded by the restored order we'd created together. For the first time since Richard died, I didn't feel completely alone. "What's your plan?" Claire asked. "After all this is over, after the lawsuit is settled, what are you going to do? Your father wanted me to travel, to see the world, to live the life we never had time for. Are you going to—" "I don't know. It feels wrong to be happy when everything is falling apart. Dad wouldn't want you to be miserable. He'd want you to live." She was right. Richard's letter had been clear. Live, don't mourn too long, be happy. Maybe I will, after the lawsuit, after everything is settled. Maybe I'll go to Paris like your father wanted. "Take me with you," Claire said suddenly. "When you go, let me come with you. I've never been to Paris, and I could use a fresh start after David and I sell the house." "You're really doing it, selling the house?" "We have to. We can't afford it without David's salary, and my boutique is closing next month. We found a townhouse in a cheaper neighborhood. It's smaller, but it's what we can actually afford. David got a job as a project manager at a smaller firm. It's a pay cut, but it's honest work. We're figuring it out." Pride swelled in my chest. This was what Richard had hoped for. His children learning to stand on their own feet, to live within their means, to value things other than money. "I'd love for you to come to Paris with me, but only if you can afford the trip yourself. I'm not paying." Claire smiled. "I know, and I wouldn't want you to. I'll save up. Give me 6 months and I'll have enough." After Claire left, I sat in Richard's chair feeling like maybe, just maybe, we were going to survive this. The lawsuit was still ongoing. Marcus still hated me. I still couldn't see my grandchildren, but Claire was changing. Thomas was getting help, and I was learning that I was stronger than I'd ever known. The preliminary hearing for Marcus's lawsuit was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Jonathan warned me it would be intense, that Marcus and his lawyer would paint me as a monster, that the judge would hear all the worst accusations and allegations. But he also said we had a strong case, that Richard's video testimony was compelling, that the cognitive assessments were ironclad. "Just be prepared," he said the night before. "Whatever they say about you in that courtroom, remember, it's strategy. It's not personal, even though it feels personal." But when Marcus took the stand the next day and looked right at me and said, "My mother killed my father," so it felt pretty damn personal. The courtroom went completely silent after Marcus said those words. Even Jennifer Chen looked surprised, like maybe her client had gone off script. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Barbara Winters, leaned forward. "Mr. Harrison, that's a very serious accusation. Do you have evidence to support that claim?" Marcus's face was red, his hands gripping the witness stand so hard his knuckles were white. "She controlled his medications. She decided who could visit and when. She kept us away from him in his final weeks, and then suddenly he's dead and she's got everything. You tell me what that looks like." Jonathan was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. There's been no criminal investigation, no autopsy findings suggesting anything other than natural death from terminal cancer. Mr. Harrison is making wild accusations with absolutely no basis in fact." Sustained. "Mr. Harrison, unless you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, I suggest you stick to the facts of the estate dispute." "The fact is, my mother manipulated my dying father," Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage. "The fact is, she turned him against his own children. The fact is, she's sitting on $47 million that should have been ours." "Should have been yours?" Judge Winters repeated slowly. "Interesting choice of words. Mr. Harrison, did your father ever promise you an inheritance?" Marcus faltered. "Well, no, not in writing, but it was understood. I worked at his company for 22 years. He always said I'd take over. That was basically a promise." "Basically a promise is not a legal contract." "What else do you have?" Jennifer Chen stepped in smoothly. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Harrison isolated Richard Harrison from his family during his final illness. We have phone records showing she screened his calls, prevented visits, controlled all access to him." "Because he was dying," I said before I could stop myself. "Because he was in pain and exhausted and couldn't handle a parade of people demanding things from him." Judge Winters looked at me. "Mrs. Harrison, you'll have your turn to testify. Mr. Blackwood, does your client wish to make a statement now?" Jonathan shook his head. "Not at this time, Your Honor. We'll present our case when the plaintiff rests." The hearing continued for another hour. Marcus testified about how close he and Richard had been, conveniently forgetting to mention all the missed dinners and canceled visits. Patricia testified about what a devoted son Marcus was, how he'd worked tirelessly at the company, how devastated he'd been by Richard's death. She cried on the stand, real tears that I was sure she'd practiced in the mirror. Then Jennifer Chen called Emma to testify. My 12-year-old granddaughter walked into that courtroom looking tiny and scared, wearing a dress that was too formal, her hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt. She wouldn't look at me as she took the stand. "Emma, can you tell us about your relationship with your grandmother?" Jennifer asked gently. "She was nice before," Emma said in a small voice. "She used to come to my school plays and bring me presents, but then Grandpa got sick and she changed. She wouldn't let us see him. She said he was too tired, but I think she just didn't want us there." "Did you want to see your grandfather?" "Yes, I wanted to say goodbye, but Grandma said no. I felt like I'd been stabbed. That wasn't true. Richard had been the one who didn't want the children to see him at the end, didn't want them to remember him skeletal and weak and dying. I'd respected his wishes, but apparently I was the villain for that too. And how do you feel about your grandmother now?" Emma finally looked at me and her eyes were full of tears. "I think she stole from us. I think she took Grandpa's money, and now Dad says we might lose our house, and it's all her fault." Jonathan stood up. "Your Honor, this child has clearly been coached. She's repeating her father's talking points verbatim." "I have to agree," Judge Winters said. "Ms. Chen, unless you have specific evidence of manipulation beyond a child's coached testimony, I suggest you move on." Jennifer looked frustrated but nodded. "No further questions." "Mr. Blackwood, do you wish to cross-examine?" Jonathan looked at me, and I shook my head slightly. I wasn't going to put Emma through that. She was 12 years old and parroting what her father had told her. Destroying her on the stand wouldn't prove anything except that her grandmother was cruel. "No questions, Your Honor." Emma left the stand looking confused, like she'd expected more drama. Marcus hugged her as she passed him, whispering something in her ear that made her nod. After a lunch recess, it was our turn. Jonathan called his first witness, Thomas. My youngest son walked into that courtroom looking better than he had in weeks. He'd gained back some weight, his clothes were clean and pressed, his eyes were clear. He'd been in rehab for 12 days, and it was already showing. "Mr. Harrison, you're one of the beneficiaries in your father's will, is that correct?" "I am. My father left me his Purple Heart and $1. "How did you feel when you learned that—" Thomas took a deep breath. "Honestly, I was pissed, really pissed. I thought it was cruel and unfair, and that my mother had manipulated him into it." Marcus smiled like he'd won something, but Thomas wasn't done. "But then I thought about it, really thought about it, and I realized my father wasn't being cruel. He was being honest. He was showing me what I'd become and giving me a chance to change." "What had you become?" "An alcoholic who couldn't hold a job. A 40-year-old child who expected my parents to bail me out every time I screwed up. someone who valued a vacation in Cabo more than saying goodbye to his dying father. The courtroom was silent. Marcus's smile had disappeared. Your brother Marcus claims your mother manipulated your father into changing his will. Do you believe that? No, I don't. My father tried to talk to me about the will before he died. He called me and asked me to come over because he wanted to explain his decisions. I blew him off, told him we'd talk later. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he wanted to prepare me for it, but I was too busy being irresponsible to listen. Did your mother have any influence over your father's testamentary decisions? My mother's only influence was being the person who actually showed up, who actually took care of him, who actually loved him enough to put his needs first. If that's manipulation, then sure, she manipulated him, but I call it being a good wife. Jennifer Chen stood up. Your Honor, this witness is clearly biased. He's the plaintiff's brother, Judge Winters said dryly. Of course he's biased, but bias doesn't make him wrong. Continue, Mr. Blackwood. Jonathan smiled. Mr. Harrison, your brother claims your father wasn't of sound mind when he changed his will. Do you agree? My father was the smartest person I ever knew right up until the day he died. The cancer took his body, but his mind was sharp. He knew I was a screw-up. He knew Marcus was entitled. He knew Claire cared more about her social life than her family. He saw us clearly maybe for the first time, and he made his decisions based on that clarity. Thank you. No further questions. Jennifer Chen approached Thomas like a shark circling prey. Mr. Harrison, isn't it true that your mother is paying for your rehab? Yes. $40,000, correct. That's right. And isn't it convenient that you're testifying in her favor after she wrote you such a large check? Thomas smiled, and there was something of the old Richard in that smile, something sharp and knowing. My mother offered to pay for rehab before I agreed to testify, and she did it with conditions. I have to stay the full 3 months. I have to complete the program. She's not enabling me, she's helping me save myself. That's the difference between what she's doing and what my father and I both used to do, which was throw money at problems without requiring any accountability. But you're still benefiting financially from supporting her story. I'm benefiting from her support, yes, but it's not her story, it's the truth. My father was of sound mind. He made his choices, and I respect those choices even though they hurt. Jennifer looked frustrated. No further questions. Next, Jonathan called Claire. My daughter walked to the stand with her head high, wearing a simple dress I'd never seen before, probably something she'd bought at Target instead of her usual boutique shopping. She looked different somehow. Less polished. More real. Mrs. Thompson, you attended your father's funeral, correct? No, I didn't. I chose to attend a bachelorette party instead. The honesty of it seemed to shock the room. Even Jennifer Chen looked surprised. Can you tell us about that decision? It was the worst decision I ever made. I chose a party over saying goodbye to my father. I told myself it was okay that he was already dead, so it didn't matter that my friend needed me more. But the truth is, I was selfish and thoughtless, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Your brother Marcus claims your mother manipulated your father. Do you agree? No, my father tried to prepare me too. He called me 2 weeks before he died and asked me to come over, said he wanted to talk about something important. I said I was too busy planning Jessica's bachelorette party. He said it was about the will and the future, and I said we could talk about boring stuff like that later, but there was no later. He died before I made time for him. Claire was crying now, real tears, not the practiced kind Patricia had deployed. My father knew we'd let him down. He knew we'd choose other things over him. He literally told my mother it would happen, and she didn't believe him. But he was right. About all of us. Did your mother ever suggest your father change his will? No, if anything, she defended us. She made excuses for us. She told Dad he was being too harsh, too unforgiving. She loved us so much she was blind to what we'd become. Dad saw clearly and she didn't. And now we're all paying for what we did, not what she did. Jennifer Chen looked less confident when she stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Thompson, you understand that if your mother wins this case, you get nothing correct. I get the pearl necklace and $1, which is more than I deserve. Yet you're testifying against your own financial interests. I'm testifying for the truth. My father was right about me. I was spoiled and entitled and cared more about parties than people. Maybe losing everything will teach me to be better. That's what Dad hoped for. Isn't it possible you're saying what your mother wants to hear so she'll give you money later? My mother has made it very clear that if I want her help in the future, I have to earn it. I have to prove I've changed. I have to show her through actions, not words, that I've learned something. So no, I'm not testifying for future money. I'm testifying because it's right. Jennifer sat down looking defeated. Claire left the stand and walked past Marcus without looking at him. He stared at her with such hatred I barely recognized my son. Finally, Jonathan called me. I walked to the stand feeling every one of my 70 years. I'd barely slept in weeks. I'd lost 15 pounds. I had stress headaches that never went away. But I straightened my spine and put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Mrs. Harrison, let's start at the beginning. When did your husband first discuss changing his will with you? About 6 months before he died, right after his diagnosis. He said he'd been thinking about our children, about what kind of people they'd become, about what would happen to his money after he was gone. He was worried they'd squander it, that it would ruin them instead of help them. What did you say? I told him he was wrong. I defended them. I said they were good people who just needed time to mature. I believed that right up until the day of his funeral when none of them showed up. Tell us about that day. I took a deep breath and told the story again. The phone calls that morning, Marcus choosing golf, Claire choosing a party, Thomas choosing Cabo, standing alone in that funeral home with 200 empty chairs, reading Richard's letter and realizing he'd known he'd predicted it all and I'd refused to believe him. Your son Marcus claims you isolated his father during his final illness. Is that true? I controlled visitors because Richard asked me to. He was in pain. He was weak. He was dying. He didn't want people seeing him like that. He especially didn't want his children seeing him like that. He wanted them to remember him healthy and strong, not skeletal and suffering. Did you prevent your children from visiting? No, I told them they were welcome any time. Marcus came twice in 3 months and stayed less than an hour each time. Claire came once and spent the entire visit on her phone planning some charity gala. Thomas didn't come at all until the very end, and when he did, he was drunk. I looked at Marcus as I said this and watched his face turn red. Jennifer Chen was writing notes furiously, but she had to know this was all verifiable. Richard's nurse had kept detailed logs of every visitor, every conversation, every moment of his final months. Mrs. Harrison, why are you enforcing a will that cuts your children out? Why not just give them their inheritance and avoid all this conflict? Because my husband asked me not to. Because he believed this was the only way they'd learn. Because he was right about them, and I was wrong. Because I loved him, and I trusted him. And even though this is destroying me, even though I'm losing my children and my grandchildren and becoming a villain in everyone's story, I owe it to him to see this through. My voice broke on the last words. I couldn't help it. The weight of everything, the loneliness, the betrayal, the fear that I was doing the wrong thing, it all came crashing down. Do you love your children, Mrs. Harrison? More than my own life. That's why this is so hard. That's why I cry myself to sleep every night. That's why I'd give anything to go back and have them show up to their father's funeral so none of this had to happen. But I can't change the past. I can only honor my husband's wishes and pray that someday my children will understand. Jennifer Chen's cross-examination was brutal. She hammered me about every decision I'd made during Richard's illness, every visitor I'd limited, every phone call I'd screened. She tried to paint me as a control freak who'd manipulated a dying man for money. She brought up the fact that I hadn't worked in 40 years, implying I was a gold digger who'd been waiting for Richard to die so I could cash in. But Jonathan had prepared me well. I stayed calm. I answered every question honestly. I admitted when I'd made mistakes but stood firm on the facts. Richard had been of sound mind. Richard had made his own choices. I had not manipulated him. When it was finally over, Judge Winters called a recess. I'll issue my ruling in 3 days. Both parties are dismissed. Jonathan walked me out of the courthouse through a crowd of reporters shouting questions. Marcus had clearly alerted the media to turn this into a public spectacle. I kept my head down and didn't answer any of them. In Jonathan's car, I finally let myself fall apart. I called my son a bad father on the stand. I exposed Claire's selfishness. I destroyed them publicly. You told the truth. They destroyed themselves by suing you. What if the judge rules against me? What if she decides Marcus is right and I manipulated Richard? She won't. We have too much evidence. The video testimony alone is damning. Richard explaining in his own words why he made these choices while clearly lucid and articulate. No judge is going to overturn that. But what if she does? Jonathan pulled over and turned to face me. Then we appeal, and we keep appealing until we win. Because you're right and they're wrong, and eventually the legal system will recognize that. The next 3 days were torture. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except what Judge Winters might decide. Thomas called every day from rehab to check on me. Claire came over twice with food I couldn't eat and company I barely registered. Even Jonathan seemed nervous, though he tried to hide it. On the third day, we returned to court for the ruling. The courtroom was packed. Marcus and Patricia sat on one side with Jennifer Chen and a team of associates. Jonathan and I sat on the other side with Claire behind us and Thomas on speakerphone from rehab because he'd gotten special permission to listen. Judge Winters entered and everyone stood. She sat, we sat, and she began without preamble. I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. I've watched Richard Harrison's video testimony multiple times. I've read the cognitive assessments, the medical records, the witness statements. I've considered the arguments from both sides. And I'm ready to issue my ruling. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Mr. Harrison, your father was clearly of sound mind when he revised his will. The evidence supporting this is overwhelming. 3 separate doctors evaluated him and found him competent. His video testimony shows a man who is articulate, thoughtful, and very clear about his intentions. There is no evidence whatsoever that Mrs. Harrison manipulated him or unduly influenced his decisions. Marcus's face went pale. Jennifer Chen's expression didn't change, but I saw her shoulders sag slightly. Furthermore, I find your accusations against your mother to be not only baseless, but cruel. This woman cared for your dying father for months. She was the only one who showed up to his funeral. She has honored his final wishes despite tremendous personal cost. Your attempt to paint her as a manipulator is not only legally unfounded, it's morally reprehensible. Your Honor, Jennifer Chen started to object, but Judge Winters held up her hand. I'm not finished. Mr. Harrison, your father left you his car and $1. That was his choice to make. He explained his reasoning clearly in his video testimony. He hoped that losing your inheritance would teach you lessons that having it never could. Based on your behavior in this courtroom and throughout these proceedings, I'd say he was absolutely right. Marcus stood up, his face red. This is bullshit. You're just another woman protecting another woman. This is gender bias, and I'll appeal. Mr. Harrison, sit down, and if you speak out of turn again, I'll hold you in contempt. Marcus sat, but he looked like he wanted to flip the table. My ruling is as follows. Richard Harrison's will is valid and will be upheld in its entirety. Mrs. Harrison is confirmed as the executor and sole beneficiary of the estate as outlined in the will. Marcus Harrison's lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. Furthermore, I'm ordering Marcus Harrison to pay Mrs. Harrison's legal fees, which I understand have exceeded $300,000 so far. The courtroom erupted. Marcus was shouting. Patricia was crying. Jennifer Chen was trying to calm her clients while already planning the appeal I could see in her eyes. Jonathan was squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. Order, I will have order in this courtroom. Judge Winters slammed her gavel. Mr. Harrison, I understand you're disappointed, but your father made his choices for good reasons. I suggest you spend some time reflecting on those reasons instead of blaming your mother. Court is adjourned. She left and chaos descended. Reporters swarmed trying to get quotes. Marcus was screaming at Jennifer Chen. Patricia was on her phone, probably already calling every friend she had to tell them the judge was biased. Claire was hugging me and crying. Thomas was shouting congratulations through the phone speaker. Jonathan pulled me out through a side door, and we escaped before the media could corner us. In the quiet of his car, I finally let myself believe it. We won. You won. Richard won. Justice won. Marcus is going to appeal. Let him. He'll lose again. Every court that looks at this evidence will come to the same conclusion. Your husband was brilliant in how thoroughly he documented everything. I thought about Richard in those final weeks, weak and dying, but still so sharp, still planning everything out, still trying to protect me and teach our children one last lesson. He'd known this would happen. He'd known Marcus would sue. He'd prepared for all of it. I wish he was here to see this. He is seeing it somewhere, and he's proud of you. When I got home, there were 17 messages from reporters, 4 from lawyers offering to help Marcus with his appeal, and 1 from an unknown number. I almost didn't listen to that one, but something made me press play. Grandma, it's Emma. Her voice was small and scared. I'm sorry about what I said in court. Dad told me what to say. He said you were bad and stealing from us. But I heard Grandma Claire talking to Mom, and she said you didn't steal anything, that Grandpa wanted it this way. I don't understand what's happening, but I miss you. Can you call me back? But don't tell Dad I called. He took my phone, but I'm using Mom's. I played the message 3 times, crying harder each time. My granddaughter didn't hate me. She'd been coached, manipulated by her father, but underneath it all, she still loved me. I wanted to call her back immediately, but I couldn't risk making things worse with Marcus. Instead, I texted Claire. Emma called me. She apologized. What's happening over there? Claire responded immediately. Patricia is starting to see the truth. She's furious at Marcus for dragging the family through this and losing. Emma heard them fighting last night. Marcus said he's going to appeal, but Patricia said they don't have money for more legal fees, and he needs to let it go. Is Emma okay? She's confused and scared. She doesn't understand why her dad is so angry. I think she's starting to realize he might not be the good guy in this story. Hope flickered in my chest. Maybe Emma would be okay. Maybe eventually I'd get to see her again to explain what really happened to rebuild our relationship. That night, I sat in Richard's chair and read his letter again. The one where he'd told me to live, to travel, to be happy. The one where he'd said if our children genuinely changed, if they showed through actions that they understood, then maybe I could help them. Claire had changed. She was selling her house, living within her means, working a real job. Thomas was in rehab, fighting his demons, trying to become someone worthy of his father's Purple Heart. 2 out of 3 of my children were learning the lessons Richard had hoped to teach. But Marcus was still angry, still entitled, still believing the world owed him something. And that broke my heart because I didn't know if he'd ever change, if he'd ever understand, if I'd ever get my oldest son back. I pulled out my laptop and opened a travel website. Paris. Richard had always wanted to take me to Paris. We'd talked about it for years, planned it a dozen times, but there was always another deal, another project, another reason to postpone. I booked 2 tickets for 3 months from now, one for me and one for Claire. We'd walk along the Seine. We'd see the Eiffel Tower. We'd eat croissants and drink wine and remember Richard and celebrate our survival. And maybe, just maybe, by the time we got back, Marcus would have figured out what his father had tried to teach him. That some things mattered more than money. That showing up mattered. That family wasn't about inheritances and assets and who got what. It was about being there when it counted. I fell asleep in Richard's chair holding his letter. Reaming. Paris and second chances and a future where maybe eventually my whole family could heal. The Paris ticket sat on my desk for 2 weeks before Marcus found out about them. I don't know how he discovered it. Maybe Emma had mentioned it to Patricia, who'd mentioned it to him, but suddenly my phone was ringing at 11 o'clock at night with my oldest son screaming on the other end. You're taking Claire to Paris. You're spending Dad's money on a vacation while we're about to lose our house. I was already in bed exhausted from another day of dealing with estate paperwork and the aftermath of the lawsuit. Marcus, it's 11 at night. I don't care what time it is. You're really going to Paris. With my inheritance money, while your grandchildren might end up homeless. Your children are not going to be homeless. You have a job. Patricia has a job. You'll figure it out like millions of other families do. We can't afford our mortgage on our salaries. We've been living on the assumption that I'd inherit Dad's company. We made financial decisions based on that. That was your mistake, not mine. Your father never promised you anything. He raised me in that business. He let me work there for 22 years. What was I supposed to think? I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake and angry. You were supposed to think that you were an employee, not an heir apparent. You were supposed to save your own money and make your own plans instead of counting on your father's death to solve your problems. That's a terrible thing to say. It's the truth. You've been waiting for your father to die so you could take over his life. Well, he died, and you got nothing, and now you have to build your own life. That's what adults do, Marcus. I can't believe you're choosing Claire over me. What did she do to deserve a trip to Paris? She missed Dad's funeral, too. She apologized. She admitted she was wrong. She's changed her entire life, sold her house, got a real job, lived within her means. She's shown me through actions that she learned something. What have you done except sue me and call me a murderer in court? Silence on the other end. Then quietly, I didn't mean that. I was angry. You accused me of killing your father, Marcus, in a courtroom, under oath. You looked the judge in the eye and said, I murdered my husband. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I'm sorry. Are you sorry you lost the lawsuit and now have to pay my legal fees? More silence. Then his voice changed, got harder. I'm filing the appeal tomorrow. Jennifer says we have good grounds. Says Judge Winters showed bias. Judge Winters showed common sense. But go ahead. Waste more money on lawyers. Drag this out for another year. I'll keep winning and you'll keep losing, and eventually you'll run out of money for legal fees, and we can all move on with our lives. Or maybe I'll win, and you'll have to give back everything you stole. I didn't steal anything. But let's say, hypothetically, you win. Let's say some appeals court overturns the will and divides the estate 3 ways. You know what you'll get, about $15 million. And you know what you'll do with it. You'll buy a bigger house and a fancier car, and in 5 years you'll be broke because you've never learned how to manage money or live within your means. And then you'll resent your father for not leaving you more. That's who you are, Marcus. That's who you've always been. And you're perfect. You're so much better than me. No, I'm not perfect. I enabled you for years. Your father and I both did. We gave you everything and taught you nothing. That's our failure. But your father tried to fix it at the end, and I'm going to honor that even if it means losing you. You already lost me. The day you decided Dad's money was more important than your children. I lost you the day you decided a golf game was more important than your father's funeral. Everything else is just consequences. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I just told my oldest son exactly what I thought of him, and it felt terrible and liberating all at once. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the conversation, wondering if I'd been too harsh, if I should have been more understanding, if there was something I could have said that would have made him understand. But I knew there wasn't. Marcus had to hit bottom on his own. No amount of explaining or pleading or mothering was going to change him. Only consequences could do that. The next morning, Claire called. Marcus is telling everyone you're abandoning the family to go party in Paris. Let him tell everyone whatever he wants. He's posting about it on Facebook, making you sound like some heartless monster who's living it up while her grandchildren suffer. Are his children suffering? No, Patricia got a job as a real estate agent. She's actually doing really well, and Marcus got hired as a consultant for one of his old clients. They're fine. They had to downsize to a smaller house, but they're not homeless or starving. He's just being dramatic. So nothing's changed. Mom, he's also saying you won't let him see Dad's ashes. That stopped me. What? He says you're keeping Dad's ashes from him, that he wants to have a memorial service, but you won't give him access. That's not true. Your father's ashes are in an urn in his study. Marcus is welcome to visit anytime he wants. He just has to actually show up. Can I come see Dad today? I want to say goodbye properly since I missed the funeral. Of course, sweetheart. Come whenever you want. Claire arrived an hour later with flowers, white roses like the ones I'd carried at the funeral nobody attended. We went to Richard's study where his urn sat on his desk, a simple bronze container that somehow held all that remained of the man I'd loved for 43 years. Claire knelt in front of it and started crying immediately. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I chose a stupid party over you. I'm sorry I was such a terrible daughter. I put my hand on her shoulder and let her cry. She needed this, needed to grieve properly, needed to say the things she hadn't been able to say at a funeral she hadn't attended. I got a new job, Claire said after a while, still talking to the urn, at a marketing firm. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I'm good at it. And David and I are doing better. We're actually talking to each other now that money isn't the main thing we fight about. We're figuring out who we are when we're not pretending to be rich. She looked up at me. Is this what Dad wanted? What, for us to struggle and figure it out? He wanted you to understand that money isn't everything, that relationships matter more than status, that showing up is more important than showing off. I get it now, I really do. I just wish I'd understood it before he died. Me too, baby, me too. We spent the rest of the morning going through old photos, remembering Richard not as the distant businessman he'd become, but as the young father who'd played tea party with Claire and let her paint his toenails and told her she could be anything she wanted to be. Do you think he'd be proud of me now? Claire asked as she was leaving. I think he'd be proud that you're trying. That's all he ever wanted, for you to try to be better. After Claire left, I did something I'd been avoiding. I called the number Emma had used to leave me that voicemail. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. Hello, Patricia's voice cautious. Patricia, it's Margaret. I'm calling about Emma. Emma's at school. I know, I wanted to talk to you about everything that's happened. Silence. Then, I don't know what to say to you. You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that I love those children. I love Emma and Jake and Sophie more than my own life. And if Marcus is telling them things about me, things that aren't true, I need you to know the real story. Marcus says you stole everything. Richard left me everything because I was the one who stayed. That's not theft, that's a choice he made. A choice he documented extensively so no one could question his reasoning. But the kids ask me why Grandma is rich and we have to move to a smaller house. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. That Grandpa left his money to Grandma because that's what he wanted. That sometimes we don't get what we expect in life and we have to adjust. That having less money doesn't mean having less love. Patricia made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Marcus won't let them see you. He says you're toxic. I know, but Emma called me. She apologized for what she said in court, and I want you to know that I understood. I know Marcus coached her. I'm not angry at her. She cried for a week after the court ruling. She feels terrible about what she said. Tell her I forgive her. Tell her I love her. Tell her that when she's older, if she wants to understand what really happened, I'll explain everything. But for now, tell her it's okay. I'll tell her, but Margaret, I don't know if this is ever going to get better. Marcus is so angry. He talks about you constantly, about how you betrayed him, how you stole his future. I don't think he's ever going to let this go. Then that's his choice, but it doesn't have to be yours. You and the kids can have a relationship with me separate from Marcus's anger. He'd never allow it. He doesn't get to control everyone's choices. That's the whole problem. He thinks he gets to decide how everyone feels and what everyone does. But you have free will, Patricia. So do Emma and Jake and Sophie. Another long silence. I need to think about this. I need to figure out what's best for my kids. That's all I'm asking. Just think about it. I hung up feeling like maybe, possibly, there was hope for my grandchildren even if Marcus never came around. That afternoon, Jonathan called with news about the appeal. Marcus filed this morning. Jennifer Chen is claiming judicial bias, improper admission of evidence, and about 6 other grounds that aren't going to work. How long will this take? Probably a year, maybe longer. The appeals court will review everything, likely uphold Judge Winters' ruling, and then Marcus can either accept it or file another appeal. This could drag on for years if he's stubborn enough. He's stubborn enough. Margaret, I need to ask you something. If Marcus came to you tomorrow and apologized, really apologized, showed genuine remorse, would you help him? I thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know. Richard's letter said to make them earn it, to make them prove they've changed. But how do you prove something like that? How do I know if Marcus has really changed, or if he's just saying what I want to hear to get money? That's the question, isn't it? Richard made this harder than it needed to be by dying. If he was still here, he could make those judgment calls himself, but he left it up to you, and that's an impossible burden. Everything about this is impossible, but I have to try, for Richard, for the children, for myself. That night I pulled out Richard's will and read it again, looking for guidance I'd missed. In one of the addendums, he'd written something I hadn't noticed before. If circumstances change significantly, if genuine transformation occurs, Margaret has my full authority to amend these bequests at her discretion. I trust her judgment more than my own. She knows our children better than anyone. If she believes they've truly learned and changed, she can help them. But only if she's certain. Not hope, not wishful thinking. Certainty. Certainty. How could I ever be certain? People were good at performing, at saying the right things, at appearing changed while remaining fundamentally the same. 2 weeks later, Thomas completed his rehab program. I drove out to pick him up, nervous about seeing him after 3 months apart. The facility was in the mountains, peaceful and isolated, the kind of place where people went to face their demons. Thomas walked out looking different. He'd gained weight, healthy weight, and his eyes were clear in a way I hadn't seen in years. He hugged me, and I could feel his strength, not just physical, but something deeper. 91 days sober, he said. Longest I've been clean since college. I'm so proud of you. Don't be proud yet. The counselor said the real test comes now when I'm back in the real world with all my old triggers and temptations. We drove in silence for a while before Thomas spoke again. I need to tell you something. In group therapy, we had to make a list of everyone we'd hurt and how we'd hurt them. My list was 7 pages long. 7 pages of people I'd lied to, stolen from, disappointed, betrayed. And you and Dad were at the top. Tommy, let me finish. I stole money from Dad's wallet when I was in high school. Not a lot, just 20 or 40 bucks at a time, but I did it for months. I totaled his car when I was 20 and lied about how it happened. I stole Mom's jewelry twice and pawned it for drug money in college. You thought you lost it, but I stole it. I've been lying to you both for 20 years about everything. And I pulled over because I couldn't drive and process this at the same time. Why are you telling me this now? Because step 9 is making amends, and I can't make amends to Dad anymore, but I can tell you the truth. All of it. Even the parts that make me look terrible. What else? The first DUI wasn't the first time I drove drunk. It was probably the 50th time. I just finally got caught. I lost 3 jobs, not because of bad luck or bad bosses, but because I showed up drunk or high. I borrowed money from you and Dad at least 30 times, saying it was for rent or bills or emergencies, and it was always for alcohol or parties or stupid shit I didn't need. Every time you bailed me out, every time you solved my problems, you were enabling me to keep destroying myself. We were trying to help you. I know, but helping an addict is different than helping a person. Dad figured that out before you did. That's why he left me $1. That's why he cut me off. He was trying to save my life. Thomas was crying now, really crying, the kind of tears that come from deep shame and real regret. I killed him, Mom. Maybe not literally, but my behavior, my addiction, my constant need for money and attention and bailouts, it stressed him out. It added to everything else that was killing him. And I can't take that back. I can't make that right. I held my son while he sobbed, this 40-year-old man who'd finally faced the truth about himself. Your father loved you. He never stopped loving you. Even when he was disappointed, even when he was angry, he loved you. Did he say that at the end? He said he hoped you'd become a man worthy of his Purple Heart. That means he believed you could be that man. He had faith in you even when you didn't have faith in yourself. We drove the rest of the way home with Thomas staring out the window, processing everything. When we pulled into my driveway, he turned to me. I can't live with you. I know that's probably what you're thinking, that I can stay here while I get back on my feet, but I can't. I need to figure out how to survive on my own without anyone to catch me when I fall. Where will you go? There's a sober living house downtown. It's not fancy, but it's structured. There are rules, accountability, other people in recovery. I already put my name on the list. I move in tomorrow. How will you pay for it? I got a job at the rehab facility. They need someone to do grounds maintenance and basic repairs. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work, and it keeps me connected to recovery. I start next week. This was what Richard had hoped for. Not groveling or begging for money, but actual change. Real transformation. Thomas taking responsibility for his own life. Your father would be so proud of you right now. I hope so, because I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become the man he thought I could be. The man who deserves that Purple Heart, even if I never actually wear it. After I dropped Thomas at the sober living house, I drove to the cemetery. I hadn't been back since the burial couldn't face that empty plot with Richard in the ground and no one else caring enough to visit. But I went now carrying flowers and a photograph of Thomas from that morning, clean and sober and trying. I knelt beside Richard's headstone, simple black granite with his name and dates and the words beloved husband and father. He's doing it, I whispered. Thomas is really doing it. He's getting sober. He's taking responsibility. He's becoming the man you hoped he'd be. And Claire is changing too. She's living within her means, working a real job, being a real person instead of a social climbing fake. 2 out of 3 Richard. 2 out of 3 of our children are learning. The cemetery was quiet except for birds and distant traffic. I sat there for a long time just talking to my dead husband, telling him everything that had happened. Asking him if I was doing the right thing, begging him for guidance I knew wasn't coming. Marcus filed an appeal. He's not giving up. He's still angry, still convinced I stole from him. I don't know if he'll ever change. I don't know if I should keep hoping or just accept that I've lost him forever. A breeze moved through the trees, and for a moment I could almost feel Richard there with me, telling me to be patient, to have faith, to remember that some people take longer to learn than others. When I got home, there was a car in my driveway I didn't recognize. I approached cautiously and saw a woman sitting on my front steps. She stood when she saw me, and I realized it was Patricia. I'm sorry for just showing up, she said, but I needed to talk to you and I didn't want to do it over the phone. Come in. We sat in the living room, awkward and uncomfortable. Patricia looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her clothes were nice, but not designer anymore. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual salon style. She looked like a woman who'd been forced to join the real world. Marcus doesn't know I'm here, she said. If he found out, he'd lose his mind. What did you want to talk about? The truth. I want you to tell me the truth about everything. Not Marcus's version. Not the version his lawyer told in court. Your version. So I told her. Everything. The phone calls the morning of the funeral. Standing alone in that empty funeral home. Reading Richard's letter. The will, the reasoning behind it. Richard's hope that losing everything would teach them what having everything never could. Patricia listened without interrupting her expression, shifting from skeptical to thoughtful to something that looked like understanding. Marcus told me you manipulated Richard, she said when I was done. That you isolated him and poisoned him against his children. But that's not what happened, is it? No, that's what Marcus needs to believe so he doesn't have to face the truth. The truth is that he disappointed his father, that all 3 of them did, and Richard tried to fix it the only way he knew how. By cutting them out. By removing the safety net so they'd have to learn to fly on their own. Patricia was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that surprised me. "I'm glad he did it. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm glad. Marcus and I were drowning in debt trying to maintain a lifestyle we couldn't afford. We were miserable, but we couldn't admit it because we had this image to maintain. And then suddenly the money was gone and we had to face reality, and you know what reality is better." Better? We're closer now than we've been in years. We actually talk to each other. We make decisions together. We're partners instead of competitors. I like the person I'm becoming. I like that my kids are learning that money doesn't solve everything. Emma asked me last week why we're happier now that we're poor. We're not actually poor, of course, but she thinks we are compared to before. And I told her it's because we're a family now instead of just people living in the same house. I felt tears in my eye. That's what Richard wanted. That's exactly what he hoped would happen. But Marcus is still so angry. He can't see past his rage to understand that his father gave him a gift, and I don't know how to help him. You can't help him. He has to figure it out himself. What if he never does? Then you have to decide what's more important, your husband's anger or your family's happiness. Patricia nodded slowly. That's what I was afraid you'd say. She stood to leave, then turned back. The kids miss you, Emma especially. She talks about you all the time, asks when she can see Grandma again. I've been thinking about bringing them by sometime when Marcus is at work. Would that be okay? My heart leaped. More than okay. Don't get your hopes up too much. If Marcus finds out, there will be hell to pay. But they deserve to know their grandmother. They deserve to hear your side of the story. When they're older, they can make their own decisions about who's right and who's wrong. After Patricia left, I sat in my quiet house feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe things would work out. That maybe Richard's plan was working even if it was taking longer than any of us had expected. The next 6 months passed in a blur. Claire and I went to Paris, and it was everything Richard had wanted it to be. We walked along the Seine at sunset. We climbed the Eiffel Tower. We ate croissants and drank wine and talked about Richard and cried and laughed and remembered. Claire took photos of everything and said she was making an album for Richard documenting the trip he'd wanted us to take, proving to him that we'd done it. When we got back, Thomas had 6 months of sobriety under his belt and a promotion at the rehab facility. He was leading group sessions now, helping other addicts the way people had helped him. He was still living in the sober house, still taking it one day at a time, but he was doing it. Really doing it. Patricia started bringing the grandchildren by once a week, always when Marcus was at work, always with the understanding that if he ever found out, the visits would stop. Emma would hug me and tell me about school. Jake would show me his drawings. Sophie would crawl into my lap and fall asleep while I read her stories. They were getting older, growing up, and I was there to see it, even if it had to be in secret. The appeal dragged on. Jennifer Chen filed brief after brief. Jonathan responded to each one. The appeals court heard arguments, then more arguments, then scheduled another hearing. It was costing Marcus a fortune, but he wouldn't give up, and then 8 months after Judge Winters' ruling, everything changed. I was at home when Patricia called hysterical and barely coherent. It's Marcus. There's been an accident. The hospital says you need to come now. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I just remember running through those sterile hallways, following signs to the ICU, my heart in my throat, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Marcus was in surgery. A car accident, Patricia told me through tears. Someone ran a red light and hit him on the driver's seat. Internal bleeding. Possible spinal damage. They didn't know if he'd make it. Claire arrived 20 minutes later. Thomas called from work and said he was on his way. We sat in that waiting room together, the 4 of us, Marcus's family, waiting to find out if he'd live or die. This is my fault, Patricia kept saying. We fought this morning. About you, about the money, about everything. He was upset when he left. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. Maybe the fight distracted him. It's not your fault, I told her. Accidents happen. This isn't because of anything you did or didn't do. But I wondered. I wondered if the stress of the lawsuit, the financial pressure, the constant anger had been weighing on Marcus. If maybe he had been distracted. If maybe all of this, everything Richard and I had set in motion, had somehow led to this moment. The surgeon came out 4 hours later looking exhausted. He's stable. We stopped the bleeding, repaired the damage. He's going to need extensive rehab, probably months of physical therapy, but he should recover fully. We all collapsed with relief. Patricia was sobbing. Claire was hugging me. Thomas was on the phone telling his sponsor at the rehab facility that his brother was going to be okay. Can we see him, Temani? Patricia asked. He's in recovery now. Should be awake in an hour or so. Immediate family only. Patricia looked at me. She's his mother. The surgeon nodded and led us back. Marcus looked small in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines, bruised and battered, but alive. We took turns sitting with him, holding his hand, telling him to wake up. I was alone with him when his eyes finally opened. He looked around, confused, disoriented, and then his gaze landed on me. "Mom?" "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "Am I dying?" "No, you're going to be fine. You were in an accident, but you're okay now." He closed his eyes, and I thought he'd fallen back asleep, but then he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." "Shh, don't talk. Just rest." "No, I need to say it. I'm sorry. For everything. For the lawsuit. For what I said in court. For missing Dad's funeral. For all of it. I'm so sorry, Mom." Sitity. And just like that, my oldest son, my firstborn, the child who'd been so angry for so long, broke down crying in that hospital bed. Real tears. Real remorse. The kind of emotion he hadn't shown since he was a little boy. I held his hand and cried with him and wondered if this was what Richard had been waiting for. If sometimes it takes almost dying to realize what really matters. If sometimes the universe has to hit you with a car before you finally understand that money means nothing and family means everything. Marcus fell asleep still holding my hand, and I sat there in that hospital room, thinking about second chances and redemption and whether it was finally time to help my children instead of letting them struggle. Richard had said to wait for certainty for proof of real change. Was almost dying proof enough? Was this broken crying version of Marcus the real person underneath all that anger and entitlement? I didn't know. But I was going to find out.